Welcome to a special edition of the Aaron Day Show. Before we get into tonight's main program about the war on crypto, the Clarity Act, and our political prisoners, we're doing something special. OwnNothing.org is more than a website. It's a movement against the forces stripping away your property rights, your financial freedom, and your autonomy. Every movement needs an anthem. We've narrowed it down to 4 incredible songs, and we're going to play all 4 of them right now. Then it's your turn to decide. Head to OwnNothing.org to cast your vote. Plus, for every 100 people who vote, we're giving away 25 Freedom Dollars to a random voter. Let's listen to our 4 finalists. First up, Tom and Mary Johnson. This song tells the story of everyday Americans fighting back against a system designed to dispossess them. Listen closely.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Tom and Mary Johnson, Maple Street's in 99. He's at the kitchen table, 6 a.m., the screen's blue light. She's got the smart speaker listening, every whisper, every prayer. Their daughter's face lit up at midnight by the tablet's empty stare. Signed 1,000 agreements, never read a single line. You said you will own nothing, it was always the design. Tom checked his retirement, thought he had it saved away, but he's just holding IOUs. The banks get paid first when it breaks. He bought the coin that promised him would set his family free, but every transaction on the chain was there for all to see. Mary got the diagnosis, found her records had been sold. They want us to own nothing, not our health, our wealth, our soul. Then one night at the kitchen table, hands around the coffee cups, Tom looked at Mary and Mary looked at Tom, and both said, that's enough. We'll own nothing but our freedom. Well, and where they cannot see, we'll own nothing but tomorrow. Wallet to wallet, find it free. They said we'll own nothing. We'll own our destiny. We found another way. Now they're trading private coins, no ledger they can read. Money that can't be frozen, transactions they can't see. Daughter's learning in her kitchen, not a screen that steals her soul. Son knows how to build things on nothing they control. Found 1,000 other families, wallets lean but names unknown. When they said we'd own nothing, we build a world they'll never own. We'll own nothing but our freedom, building where they cannot see. We'll own nothing but tomorrow. Wallet to wallet, finally free. They said we'll own nothing. We'll own our destiny. We found another way. If you already own nothing, what you got to lose? If they already took it all, what's left for you to choose? You can sit and wait for permission, or you can finally move on nothing, then build everything. We got nothing left to lose. We'll own nothing but our freedom, building where they cannot see. We'll own nothing but tomorrow. Wallet to wallet, finally free. They said we'll own nothing. Well, we'll own our destiny. We found another way. Tom and Mary Johnson, they don't own a thing they say, but They got nothing left to lose now. Come and build another way.
Our second anthem is called Sovereign Ground. It's about standing firm on the land that's yours that no government or corporation can take from you. Remember, vote at OwnNothing.org.
Every click you make, every form you sign, every cent you take, they're watching all the time. Every word you speak, every thought you share, they're building up a cage and you don't even care. But we see through the screen now, we're breaking from the machine now.
Third, we have Taking Back Tomorrow. This one's about reclaiming the future they're trying to steal from your children. Your vote matters. Head to OwnNothing.org.
Another day inside the machine again. Yes, I know where my future, click by click. Never saw the walls until they made me sick. They told us this was freedom, sold us on the dream. But everything we built for them was never what it seemed. The money in our pockets, just permission to exist. And one by one we'll wake up, we will not be dismissed. Can you feel it rising? Can you see the light? We've been sleeping too long, now we're ready for the fight. We're taking back tomorrow, we're standing sovereign ground. We're building in the ashes of a world that let us down. They said we'd own nothing, we forget what freedom means. But we're the ones still standing, we're the ones who dream. From the frozen bank accounts to the censored spoken word, they thought they'd keep us silent, thought we'd stay inside the herd. But parallel economies are rising everywhere. A million points of freedom, and they can't control the air. Can you feel it breaking? Can you see it fall? The system built on paper, and we're gonna burn it all. We're taking back tomorrow, we're standing sovereign ground. We're building in the ashes of a world that let us down. They said we'd own nothing, we'd forget what freedom means. But we're the ones still standing, we're the ones who dream. One by one, we found each other, hand in hand, we built together. They can freeze our money, they can shut the doors, but they can't break the spirit of what we're fighting for. We're taking back tomorrow, we're standing sovereign ground. We're building in the ashes of a
And finally, Turning the Page, a song about closing the chapter on their agenda and writing our own story. After you hear this one, go to OwnNothing.org, pick your favorite, and cast your vote. Remember, 25 freedom dollars for every 100 voters.
Woke up this morning, phone already in my hand, scrolling through the feed before my feet hit the land. Sign away my data, never read a single word. Gave them all my hours, every word. But something's stirring in the cities and the town. Sleepers are awakening, the program's breaking down. We're taking back our time. We're taking back our minds. We're building something new while their system falls behind. They said we own nothing and learn to love the cage, but we're writing different chapters on a sovereign page. Money isn't money, it's a chain around our wrists. Programmable permission slips they give us to exist. But parallel economies are rising from the ground. When the old world starts to crumble, that's when we'll be found. The architects of capture never saw us coming through. A million little exits, and we're building something new. We're taking back our time. We're taking back our minds. We're building something new while their system falls behind. They said we own nothing and learn to love the cage, but we're writing different chapters on a sovereign page. They own the screens but not our eyes. They own the feed but not the skies. They build a world of ones and zeros, but we're flesh and blood and sovereign heroes. We're taking back our time. We're taking back our minds. We're building something new while their system falls behind. They said we'd own nothing and learn to love the cage, but every line they wrote, we're turning the page. Turning the page. Turning the page. Sovereign page. Sovereign page.
Those are your 4 finalists. Now it's time for you to decide. Go to OwnNothing.org right now and vote for the anthem that speaks to you. Share this with everyone you know who believes in property rights and financial freedom. Own nothing? No, own everything. Vote now. All right. Welcome back to the Aaron Day Show. This is season 3, episode 4. It seems like this hasn't happened for like a month. I almost forgot how to get the podcast up and running here today. So welcome back, everyone. And as a reminder, this show, well, we've moved back down now to 1 time a week. So the show will regularly be Thursday at 6 p.m. Trying to do this twice a week is a bit much, typically, since they end up being usually 3 or 4 hours. But on top of that, as you will see, we have a lot of projects brewing, launching at various phases, as well as a lot of travel and speaking coming up. So I want to make sure that we have a quality podcast every week, and hopefully we'll be able to get more interactivity as well, more people participating in the live chat at the end as well. And I encourage you, if you had an opportunity to listen to those songs, we're going to be doing this for each of the 6 sites, picking kind of an anthem. I have a ton of songs. I mean, I pretty much listen to music that we create all the time in the background while I'm working. So there's just a constant stream of new music, and then we kind of curate a top list, and then we're going to put it up for a vote. So we're starting with the OwnNothing.org website, which I think is going to be kind of the lead website that links to all others. But it's essentially a site that allows you to do your own diagnostics and figure out your own sovereignty score. So how much of your own money do you own, your own property, your own attention? What are you looking at in terms of government surveillance, education surveillance, and so forth? And so now, of course, the diagnosis is part of the problem, or part of the exercise. But the more important part is then to provide tools and a network of resources. Some of the resources we're going to create, but most of the resources will not be us. We're going to be bringing in other solutions and helping people figure out, based on where you are, how you can increase your sovereignty. So, as an example, one thing you can do is move. And I know for a lot of people that seems impossible, and for some people it may be impossible. It's easier than you think. If people are concerned about liberty, I don't know how you could stay in New York City, for instance. But even if you can't move physically, you're going to be able to learn things like you can form trusts and legal documents. You can shop jurisdictions. Even if you're physically located somewhere, you can actually engage in commerce and use legal services that have more favorable terms in a different state. This is just one example. Obviously, moving is one, but figuring out which technology you use. Once you understand that you don't own the money in your bank or you don't own your 401k, then you can diversify into assets that you actually own and have in your own self-custody, on and on and on. So I think this is going to be, I wanted to create something that everybody could use and that could help people no matter where you're at. So it's not an all or nothing, I have to move here, or I have to do this big change. Everybody can start making small incremental changes. So that's why we picked that one. Tonight's episode may turn out to be the most important one we've done so far, at least in terms of it being a tipping point. If you haven't followed this show much, the whole purpose of everything that we're doing is to warn people about the big threat of technocracy. And the way that I frame this is that we don't have a battle of red versus blue or US versus China. It's really a battle of freedom versus technocracy. And free will is literally at stake. It's not metaphorical. Under a technocratic form of organization, essentially you have scientists and engineers, or now increasingly AI, making decisions for you from the top down using social credit systems, digital currencies, CBDCs, AI surveillance to enforce it all. And this is an ideology that started almost 100 years ago, but really has only picked up steam recently because of advances in technology. This is not the kind of thing that you could implement if you didn't have the internet or you didn't have the ability to track or implement this type of system. And, technology is a dual-edged sword. On the one hand, it can be used for freedom or liberation, or it could be used for complete tyranny. And unfortunately, we are headed down the tyranny path. And, I've spent the last almost 4 years, first starting off warning people about central bank digital currencies and the idea that if you had money that could be tracked, programmed, and censored, through central authorities, that would be the gateway to these other systems. And in researching that and understanding what's going on in the US and abroad, I then realized that CBDCs are just one part of a broader technocratic system. So what I've been doing is my wife and I have been going around the US, and then we've been traveling more overseas, not just warning people and educating people about technocracy, but teaching them how to exit the system so that you don't get stuck in it. How you can use, for instance, instead of getting stuck with the CBDC, you can use a privacy coin. Or, more specifically, now that we're dealing with these stable coins, which are tokenized fiat, a digital token that represents the dollar that can be programmed and tracked, we have as a counter to that Freedom Dollar, which is an algorithmic stable coin that's not backed by the US dollar, that can't be tracked and can't be censored. So we've been doing workshops and really trying to help people and to scale up the effort just around awareness, and then also helping empowering people to take action. Unfortunately, we're kind of in a worst case scenario right now, which is we're in the process now where we're going through rapid tokenization. So if CBDCs or stablecoins are tokenized fiat, what is going on right now in the United States Congress is they are aggressively pushing the Clarity Act, which was an act passed first in the House, and now there are two versions of it in the Senate, and eventually they'll reconcile this. But essentially what this will do is it will create CBDC-like surveillance, all of that tracking, but it won't just be applied to money. It will apply to everything that you own, every asset. Commodities. So when we talk about commodities, we're talking about not just gold and silver, all of your investments, food, energy. So money represents 5% of all of the assets on Earth. And it's these other categories and other commodities that represent the rest. This legislation will essentially centrally control and tokenize all of that. And I've been warning about this. My book, The Final Countdown, talked extensively about tokenization. It talked about efforts that were going on with the Bank of International Settlements, a project called Regulated Liability Network. And a lot of people were worried that this would be something that we would have pushed upon us through the UN and maybe the World Economic Forum. And in many ways, that actually maybe is true. However, it's actually happening without resistance in a way. And what the technocrats have figured out how to do is to do it privately. So you take private solutions, but then put those private solutions under government control and government surveillance. And it has been progressing without resistance. Right now, this bill that they were almost going to vote on a couple last week, I think it was last Thursday, the intention was to actually pass this Senate Finance Committee version on Thursday. It got derailed at the last minute. And tonight I'm going to go through a lot of the details on this. This is the hill to die on. This is where I have been putting all of my time and effort, but now we are facing it head to head. The things that I've been worrying about and warning people about are now tangibly mainstream news. The tokenization of assets and how that's going to happen was one of the two main themes at Davos this year. And no, this is not pro-freedom. This is not pro-crypto. Your number is not going to go up because of this form of tokenization. This kind of tokenization is how you end up owning nothing. I mentioned the OwnNothing site, which started out as a tool to help people realize what rights they've given away with these click wrap agreements that we sign, like 200 of them a year. Microsoft agreement, Netflix agreement, rental car agreement, your stock brokerage account, everything. Nobody reads any of it. And when you do read it, I actually shared a post and it's up to like 5.6 million views. Ironically, it was an analysis of X's new terms of service, which says they can take your data, use it to train their AI. They have ownership of that information. They can turn over your information, including DMs, to government entities at their discretion. If you try to figure out how their algorithms work, to figure out how censorship might work, that is a violation of terms of service. If you have a dispute, all disputes go through one court in a place in Texas, a small town in Texas, and the maximum damages that you're eligible for, I think it's something, it's either $100 or $200. So anyway, that post went viral, but these click wrap agreements are kind of the initial groundwork for the advancement of technocracy, because first we gave away our rights legally. Then they create these digital tokens that then represent our assets and our rights through these click wrap agreements. And this gives them an incredible amount of power and leverage to program, transfer, do whatever they want with all of our assets at scale. So, when I first published my book, I was warning people about various pilot projects. Now this is just moving at light speed. And the funny thing is, people think that we beat the WEF, that we defeated Klaus Schwab. Well, the new chair of the WEF is Larry Fink. And Larry Fink is talking about tokenizing all assets. They're saying, no, I've been saying this for 6 years, that everything will ultimately be tokenized. Tokens don't have to be a bad thing. In the same way, digital currencies don't have to be a bad thing. Privacy coins and the original intention of Bitcoin of separating money and state was a brilliant idea. Unfortunately, rather than having that approach gain momentum and steam, or argue it was hijacked, the technocrats have gotten a hold of that. And so what we're getting pushed through at scale is the centralized authoritarian version of tokenization. So the stuff I wrote about in my book, the timetables here are actually accelerated. So this is one of those things for people who thought I was nuts when I wrote the book and then ran for president to bring awareness to this issue. I was not pessimistic enough about how quickly technocracy is growing and how quickly they would roll this out. And the real trick has been to just basically switch the branding and to make it look like it's populist, even though it's literally the same technocratic firms and people pushing it. So this is absolutely critical. This is kind of the end game. So when you think about the memes that people share, where it's like, okay, you see somebody going to the grocery store and their credit card is denied or their payment is denied because of something that they said, we're talking about the ability to shut off everything that you own, not just your money. And that is being rolled out. Excuse me. This is technically already happening. And now they're pushing it as a matter of policy, and they have presented it as pro-crypto. They've presented it as pro-American, pro-innovation. And so it's like most things in politics, the actual truth is the opposite of their language. So tonight, I'm going to go through quite a bit of information. I'm going to talk about the Genius Act, which is part of it. There are really 4 pieces of legislation here. The Genius Act, the Clarity Act, and then these 2 bills in the Senate. I'm going to talk about what they mean, what the timetable is, and what we can do about it. I will say I've gotten some traction. I had a tweet analyzing the bill that came out of the Senate Finance Committee That one got 650,000 views. I have tons of interviews lined up. I probably have at least 10 interviews lined up so far. I actually just found out today, looking in my inbox of people that I don't follow, or that, I have a ton of other requests. And, I was wondering, then I put out another post last night because the agriculture bill came out related to this tokenization scheme. And that post has over 100,000 views. And so what's interesting about this is I'm one of the only people that has been talking about this consistently for a long period of time. And yet I've wondered, because I have seen a lot in my social media and my posts in my feed about people supporting this legislation. I'll look at a tweet, it's got 1,000 likes or 500 retweets, and then you'll see these people sharing this stuff. And what it turns out, which I'll show you the analysis of, almost all of this is fake. There is a network of hundreds of former government employees that work for the SEC, which regulates securities, stocks and bonds, and the CFTC, which regulates commodities. There's a revolving door. Those people are working now for crypto firms. They're working for banks. They're working for lobbying companies. There's millions, tens of millions of dollars being spent on the lobbying effort. Much of the traffic that we're looking at, it's bot driven, it's fake. So in going through this, it even in my own tweet that did over 500,000 views on this, almost none of the comments were against what I was saying or in support of the bill. It was very few and very far between. And then when you dig into who's behind the account, you'll find out, they're associated with a whatever, Digital Chamber of Commerce or one of the groups. There aren't many people that are speaking in favor of these bills that aren't getting paid or fake, which is interesting in its own right. So I'm not necessarily optimistic that we're going to stop the bill, although we might be able to have an impact because there's infighting and because there are delays. And if we can teach people what's in these bills and move beyond the political propaganda and explain to people what the political propaganda is, give them simple guidelines so that they understand what this means, then, we might be able to have some impact. But in the end, of course, the whole point is still we have to exit these systems. The root of the problem, whether it's a stablecoin or a CBDC, fiat is the root cause of that system. So we need to exit that, and we need to exit a lot of these other systems. And so I'm going to go through this. Feel free to chime in with any questions. If you would, please like and retweet this. We're at about 600 viewers right now. And I think because I was gone for a week and a half or so, I know a lot of people were emailing me saying, oh, hey, are you not doing the show now because you're running for Senate or whatever it happens to be? So I think many people aren't aware of this, but I think this is probably one of the most important shows, if not the most important we've done so far. And this is the launch point. So everything from here is going to be focused around everything that we've been talking about, of the different, Technocracy Atlas and OSR and all those other things. Those are all solutions to this centralized tokenization thing. It's just that they're now accelerating that. So we don't have until 2030. We really have this year to get enough people building parallel systems to where we can scale, because digital IDs are going to be rolled out to over half of the globe by 2027. In fact, Real ID is expected to be fully digital in all 50 states by 2027 as well. So this is real. So we are in the kind of the final stages here. So I know some of this is complicated. This is part of why they're able to pass it, because some of it is technical, and there's a lot of buzzwords and propaganda and everything else associated with it. And they've done a hell of a job of making this look like it's patriotism and crypto, just like they have people convinced that Bitcoin is freedom money when it's now, trackable surveillance digital gold. So, so there's so many layers to cut through to even get somebody to understand the current assessment of where we are. So I'm going to try to go through this. I have these slides, but I was working on the article all day, so I'm probably going to skip around a bit. Now, before I get into that, I do want to say that there are some events coming up that I want to make you aware of in case you want to catch them. I'm going to be in Mexico. Let me see what the dates are on this. I think it's February the 11th through the 14th, or I can't see because this thing is in the middle. Hold on, let me. That's really annoying. February the 12th through the 15th in Mexico City. I'll be speaking at Mineratopia. And I'm sure at this point, most of my conversations are going to be some version of what we're going to be talking about tonight. Although usually I like to talk about the solutions. Tonight, unfortunately, I have to talk a little bit more about the problem and the threat because it's imminent. So anyway, this is one of my favorite events. So if you can get to Mexico City, I encourage you to do it. Great community. Doug Tooman, who we both co-sponsored a tent at PorcFest. I'm a huge fan of Doug. He and his wife put together a fantastic event. And Mexico City is a low-cost place to travel. So, if you're thinking, well, this might be too expensive for me, check it out. Check out the flights. They're probably less expensive than you think and easier to find. I'm then going to be speaking a couple of times. I have anywhere from 2 to 4 talks at Anarchapulco, which is in Puerto Vallarta this year at a nice resort. So that's February the 15th through the 20th. And then on the 22nd, I believe, of February, the Sunday after this event, I'll be speaking at the Crypto Vigilante. I think it's a one-day conference. It's related to this. It's kind of an extra add-on to this conference, but that's a great group. You might have seen my interview with Raphael, which was one of the better interviews that I've done. So that's going to be more of a crypto-focused portion of this. Then in March the 6th through the 7th, I'm going to be in Lisbon, Portugal, at the Parallel Society Conference. And so Sterling Luheim invited me to this. You may remember he was on the show last year and has been delving into network states and really probably knows more about this topic than anyone I know. So this is going to be a great event. I'm looking forward to this, in part because I don't know most of the people. It's going to be truly educational for me. I'm going to learn quite a bit. And meet some new people. So I encourage you to look at that event if you have any, because it's part crypto and then it's part art and music. So it is not just lectures or anything like that. It's actually it's a very creative event. And then I will be giving a keynote speech of one form or another at the Libertarian National Convention, which is May the 21st through the 25th in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So this is going to be all of the various libertarian chapters from around the United States. So I'll be speaking, but there's also going to be a crypto corner there that Zano is sponsoring. So Zano is going to be there, the Zano ecosystem, the entire ecosystem. So you're going to have Zano, Freedom Dollar, Confidential Layer, everyone there, and they've got basically an entire section of the convention right off of where the main convention is happening. I think that's a great opportunity for introducing that group. I went to the Libertarian Convention a couple of years ago when Trump announced that he was, at that time going to commute Ross's sentence, but ended up giving him a full pardon. And the thing about it was people cheered that on, but then most of the rest of the time people were chanting "End the Fed." That was certainly the most popular rallying cry of that group. So I think if if all of the libertarians across the country could be made aware of the fact that, you don't have to you can end the Fed by not using the dollar, by not participating in it. And so I think Freedom Dollar and Zano and Confidential Layer will be exciting to introduce to that group. So in any event, that's quite a bit of a monologue here before we get into this, but that's what's going on. And so I hope there's an opportunity to see some of you at these events. I know many of them are going to be live streamed, but some hardcore people obviously at these events that are focused on exiting the system, focused on privacy coins, privacy technology, and libertarian philosophy. So with that said, even though I'm going to be at the Libertarian Convention, my political campaign, which I'm still exploring, I haven't decided which, I'm not going to run as a Republican or Democrat, but I don't know if I'm going to be an independent or a libertarian. So the fact that I'm speaking and participating in that conference isn't necessarily an indication of how I'm going to run if I run in New Hampshire, and that would be purely for strategic reasons. I mean, ideologically, usually I would say I'm mostly libertarian, but I've had issues in New Hampshire where there are left libertarians, and I don't sign up for left libertarians. So I guess it depends on what's going on within the party. So, all right. So with that out of the way, let's get into the details here. And I am going to have to navigate a little bit back and forth between these documents, but we have two bills going on, two main bills. So you can really look at it as Genius and Clarity. And the Genius Act already passed. So the Genius Act, which I have talked about many times as being a backdoor CBDC, that is passed, that is signed into law. We have a backdoor CBDC. And in fact, you can go to the Freedom Dollar website. I was just looking at this the other day. They have a tracker that shows you big things that are going on with respect to stable coins like Tether and USDC being seized. They're being seized constantly because, again, they're transparent, they're trackable, and now they're under this Genius Act regime. So check out Freedom Dollar website and check out that tracker and stay on top of that. It's pretty eye-opening because, what I'm seeing is kind of an escalation in stable coins being frozen and confiscated. So again, it's just a little bit of a background. And part of this also, I had to change. I was up until about 4 a.m. working on this article. I had the article almost done. And then the Senate Agriculture Committee dropped their version of the bill. So let me explain a little bit about how this works. So the Genius Act, again, it's the stablecoin bill. It's the backdoor CBDC bill. Then there's the Clarity Act, and the Clarity Act is for the tokenization of all other digital assets that aren't stablecoins. And that breaks into two different chunks. The way that those types of assets are regulated today, there are two kind of competing groups here. You have the SEC, which is really kind of out of the Senate Finance Committee, and that's stocks, bonds, that type of thing. And then you have the CFTC, which comes under the Agricultural Committee, which is again, the CFTC manages commodities. So you would say, well, why the Agricultural Committee? Well, commodities, food is a major commodity. So you already have these big regulatory regimes kind of before you even think about tokens. We have, believe me, an excess of regulation in all of those areas. I've spoken at length about more about the SEC than the CFTC, but just how absurd it is. Unless you are what's called an accredited investor, unless you have a certain net worth, you are ineligible to invest legally in startup companies because the government thinks that they're protecting you. This is what they say. They say, we want to protect, these poor innocent people from being fleeced by these, early stage investments. So in other words, you don't get the opportunity to invest in Amazon or Nvidia or whatever company when it's a startup and the shares are 1 cent each. You don't get that opportunity. You have to be protected from that. But you know what? You can buy all the lottery tickets you want. And so the SEC has always been about protecting the incumbents, protecting investment banks, protecting venture capital firms, protecting private equity. Now we're just moving into a new realm, which is tokenization. And tokenization could have been a great way, still can. I mean, I guess if you do privacy tokens and kind of look at this from a Xano approach and DeFi, which we'll get to, could have been a leveled the playing field there. This was something I was always fascinated. The reason I like tokenization is from my own experience as an entrepreneur, raising a whole bunch of money. I raised money from my first company. We had 180. They're called angel investors, small investors. And I think we raised something like $14 million. And this was over a number of years, which was pretty unheard of at the time, because this was like the mid 90s. And we had to go through all this paperwork. Every state you get a new investor, you have what are called blue sky laws. You have to have an investor questionnaire where, the investor proves to you that they're accredited, which it used to be they could just say they were accredited, sign a piece of paper, investor, oh yeah, I have a net worth that meets this. And it's kind of back then it was kind of by the honor system. Now, because of more financial surveillance and because of the incumbents wanting to truly lock people out, there's now more actual verification of, do you have those assets? Do you make that amount of money? So one of the reasons I was interested in tokenization is the ability, if you could raise money outside of the SEC, this would empower small businesses. This would be a huge win for the individual entrepreneur. You don't have to have a company that, needs $20 million worth of capital from a venture capital. If you have just a small mom and pop business, now you could have investors that could easily invest in your company. And I knew from my own experience of how difficult it was for me. I mean, I know it's almost impossible, because it costs $25,000, $30,000 just in legal paperwork to get the documents in place to be able to raise money. Well, if you are bootstrapping a company and you're trying to get your company off the ground, now you have to come up with, and this is truly how this works. You have to borrow money from friends and family or use credit cards just to pay the legal fees to comply with the documentation so that you can get then only accredited investors. Which, if you have a small business, large investors may not be interested in it because they're trying to put a lot of capital to work and make a return on a large amount of capital. You may have a perfectly good business that could generate a reasonable rate of return, but it doesn't fit the criteria of these institutional investors. And so now you're sitting here paying all this money in legal fees and then it's a horrible system. So tokenization could have improved that. And in fact, in many ways, we had the ICOs that happened in the crypto field, which of course there were some bad actors, but at the same time, it was really cool because you were seeing experimentation. You were seeing some scams, but you certainly see scams with the SEC as well. And I will point out that Bernie Madoff at one point was, I believe, in charge of the SEC or was involved with the SEC or was involved with one of the and ran one of the stock markets. So, I mean, like in most cases, the laws don't protect the individual or the investor. They're there to protect the incumbents. And so tokenization was a kind of a potential end run on that. And that was what was exciting early. Well, the SEC cracked down on that. And they cracked down on that in a big way. And Biden, it happened before Biden, but Biden really tightened the screws. And I've spoken about Jeremy Kauffman and what happened to him with his company Library, which was, he was targeted by the SEC. And he had kind of an edge case because the thing he was selling arguably wasn't even an investment token. It was a utility token, but he was targeted because of his politics. He was targeted because of his political ideology. But in any event, now with the Clarity Act coming out of the Senate Finance Committee, they want to take the horrendous, out-of-date laws that benefit the incumbents in the non-tokenized space and then apply that and even ramp up further surveillance and tracking through tokenization. So it's completely destroying the value and the fundamental point of tokenization. And in the Agriculture Committee with the CFTC, they're now trying to do the same thing. They want to take the laws and their power that they have before this whole tokenization thing came about, and they want to grow their departments and they want to grow their power. So now what's going on with the Clarity Act is you have the Senate saying, well, we don't like the Clarity Act. Essentially, we want more surveillance. We want more tracking. And the SEC people want more control over the tokenization aspect, and the CFTC people want more control over the tokenization. So in essence, in some ways, you actually have a bit of a turf war. But in the end, the CFTC and the SEC are going to expand in power, and the financial surveillance on all of our assets now, which will be tokenized, will have even more tracking, more programmability. I mean, we're talking about, and I'll get into some of the details of the bill, but we're talking about real-time tracking with 5-year history of look back of all of the transactions. So they're monitoring who is doing what in real time and holding those records for 5 years. So for most people, they don't know how bad the system was pre-tokenization. It is a technocratic nightmare post-tokenization. So we'll get into more of that. Again, as I said, this issue for me, I dropped my entire life to warn people about CBDCs and tokenization. And I didn't think that the tokenization aspect would happen at this speed and without resistance. So, and again, not with real support, AstroTurf support, but there's no resistance. And it's because people just don't know. So again, this isn't just about your money. This is about your house, your car, your retirement account, your groceries, all of it. So these people are now in Davos, and I'm seeing this stuff on my feed. The CEO of Coinbase is at Davos. He's telling bankers that Bitcoin is the future, and he's really giving it to them. And we'll dig into this. He was one of the biggest funders of the legislation. Coinbase was, directly and through other organizations. Their purpose for the regulation is not to improve your freedom or to improve your privacy. It is to create a regulatory barrier that makes it difficult, or if not impossible, for small cryptocurrency exchanges to be able to comply with the government. So I have been beyond frustrated watching people put him on a pedestal, but then again, when I dug into it, I find out they're largely not even real people. He's likely funding fake traffic to prop up his own narrative. So no, Brian Armstrong from Coinbase, Peter Thiel, and Alex Karp from Palantir are not infiltrating Davos. It's the other way around. And in some ways, what's happening is Armstrong is using, kind of crypto and the hype around crypto to negotiate him getting a ticket and having a seat at the table at Davos, not to change it, but because he wants to be a part of it. And this is I've said this before, early on when Bitcoin came about after the financial collapse, people looked at these bankers and central bankers with disgust, and it turns out it's actually envy. These people want to be them. They don't want to fix the problem. They don't want to replace or in any way transform it. They want to become part of it. So it's not the defeat of technocracy. it's a victory lap. And I don't have it here, but I do have pictures, and you can see them on X, of Armstrong at Davos. I also have a picture of him with Nancy Pelosi, and the kinds of things that they've been doing from a lobbying perspective are disgusting. They're also incompetent at it. That's a whole other thing. But, you know, again, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but the early participants in Bitcoin would I'm sure are mocking this, or well, they would be if they hadn't been co-opted by it. So so in the end here, so we are the product. So he's not there to protest, he's there to get a seat at the table, and we are the product that he's selling. And so again, what this comes down to, once you start tokenizing assets, you now have the ability to track and program and censor these tokens that represent assets at a very, very granular level. And so what this means is real-time trade surveillance. It means 5-year transaction records, data sharing with foreign central banks. So if you are of the opinion that this is a pro-America thing and that somehow we're defeating the globalists, part of all of this involves sharing the data internationally with foreign central banks. And it includes emergency freeze and liquidation powers. So even if you believe in the administration or whatever that means, I think it would be foolish for someone to think that, even if you believe that your guys are the good guys, and they're not, but even if you believe that, you're one election away from realizing you've just handed over the ability for any regime to have the ability to program and control everything that you own. That should be frightening. If that doesn't concern you from a technocratic perspective, I don't know what will or what does. So this is what's going on with the bill coming out of Tim Scott in the Senate. Then you have the CFTC bill coming out of the Agriculture Committee, senator by the name of Boozman. And in this model, the CFTC has exclusive jurisdiction over all spot transactions in the marketplace. Your crypto can only be held by government-approved custodians. Every employee must individually register with the Fed. Some of this is kind of nuanced, but, you know, I've talked about this years and years ago, but, you know, you have licensed broker dealers, and you have a whole bunch of different people that work in this financial industry, and now more people have to be registered with the Fed, even that work within these financial firms that are these intermediaries. So in essence, what we're saying is, if you are going to have any of these digital assets, the CFTC controls it. You have to get it through a custodian, and there's more surveillance and tracking even of the custodians themselves. Now, there's a big debate on this. One of the things that people complain about with the summary is that I said basically self-custody is dead. It doesn't mean self-custody is illegal. I'm not saying self-custody is illegal. You still can individually have your own keys. But what difference does it make if the minute you buy something or interact with any of these exchanges or other entities, your information is tracked and then communicated with foreign central banks and throughout an entire network of people globally, right? So it's kind of like I say that to these Bitcoin maxis that are like, well, they can't take my keys. And it's like, okay, well, the US government has 300,000 Bitcoin. How did they get them? If they can track what you have, and they can come in and threaten you with throwing you in a cage or you give up your keys, so far, most people give up their keys. That's usually kind of the way that it works. So I'm trying to, people are trying to spin all kinds of things. Well, at least this protects self-custody. This is literally some of the talking points here. And I want to take a step back and say, we've had self-custody for 16 years. If this is supposed to be pro-crypto legislation, why are we losing rights? Why are we getting more surveillance? Why are we losing privacy? How is this pro-crypto? Pro-crypto for who? Oh, just because it's clear now? Is it better to be clear that you have no rights and no privacy than for it to be vague? This is literally one of the things that they're selling as one of the selling features of this. So you'll see me posting a lot on this. And I will say this, I challenge anybody to, well, not anybody, I don't want to waste my time. I will challenge Tim Scott. I will challenge Boozman, Brian Armstrong, any of them, all of them at the same time to debate on this. They'll never do it, but happy to debate them, happy to debate these lobbyist firms and these talking heads in the Digital Chamber of Commerce and all these other people. They'll never do it, but if you want to help, tag them and say, hey, debate me on this, because the way that they're trying to pigeonhole and say, well, it's not that bad. No, everything's tracked. You can still have your own keys, but you can't spend your money anywhere without it being in this complete dystopian system. And by the way, you can have self-custody for now, and I'll get to that in a second as well, because I want to talk about political language and how politics actually works. And I want to cut through the propaganda and the bullshit, because I'm fed up with it. I don't know if anybody actually buys it, but they must, because politicians keep on doing it. So I'm going to go through a dictionary of terms used by politicians and explain what it actually means so that we can stop allowing them to use these as rah-rah terms that get associated with positive benefits for the people, because they're not. So together, the Finance and Agriculture Committee bills create the following. Every transaction is tracked. Every holder is identified. Every custodian is licensed. Every employee is registered. It's not regulatory clarity. It's the end of financial privacy. So I'm going to go, well, hold on. I actually want to take a step back. Switching back, I'm going through this long document here, and I want to make a different point altogether, which is, so one of the things that, hold on, let me try to find the right section here. Okay, here we go. So this whole idea, and I've never heard this kind of language described before. I mean, it was called the Stable Coin Act, or it was called the Genius Act or the Clarity Act, whatever it happens to be. But now they're calling it the Market Structure Bill. If you see Cynthia Loomis or whatever, she'll say, well, we're going to pass the Crypto Market Structure Bill. Or Trump will say, we're going to pass the Crypto Market Structure Bill. We're going to be the best place in the world to do crypto. So I want to question the premise. First of all, markets don't need structure. Markets emerge. Adam Smith called it the invisible hand. Billions of people engaging in voluntary exchange, serving individual interests, collectively producing outcomes no central planner could achieve. This has been able to happen throughout history, throughout economic history, without any Senate committee required. So my first question is, why do we need Congress to structure a market? And by the way, when it comes to Congress structuring a market, let's look at their track record. These are the people who covered up Jeffrey Epstein's crimes for decades while he trafficked children to the powerful. These are people who ran up $38 trillion in national debt, which is the equivalent of $100,000 for every man, woman, and child in America, including the ones who can't vote yet. These are people with constitutional power of the purse who've presided over a 96 or 97% loss in the purchasing power of the dollar since the Federal Reserve Act was passed. So that means a house that cost $3,395 in 1913 now costs $420,000. These are the people who openly engage in insider trading, buying and selling stock based on information they receive in classified briefings, then exempting themselves from laws that would imprison you for the same conduct. You see Nancy Pelosi for details. These are the people who maintained a secret taxpayer-funded slush fund to settle sexual harassment claims against members of Congress. The Office of Congressional Compliance paid out $17 million between 1997 and 2017 to silence victims of congressional predators. These are the architects of market structure. How does that make sense? Make that make any sense? I would argue the market doesn't need structure from any centralized authority based on force at all. But if you did buy that premise, let's look at the track record. These are the worst people in the world to serve this function. And I will say this, I don't know if you guys remember this guy, Senator Ted Stevens from Alaska. I remember he would talk about the internet being a series of tubes. Well, these guys aren't much different. I mean, Tim Scott's understanding of how cryptocurrency works and the purpose of having decentralized peer-to-peer commerce is not indicated in any talk or writing that he's put forward. These people are not qualified. And I know this personally. When I ran for president, I spoke with Cynthia Loomis. I gave her my book. I spoke with Warren Davis. I gave him my book. I spoke with Ron Wyden, Ted Cruz. I've spoken to a bunch of these people. Even Ted Cruz admitted he doesn't know much about crypto, and he's light years ahead of everyone else in the Senate. He admitted they don't know what they're doing. So then these people saying that, well, we need market structure from these people. What is the rationalization? And so I know you might be saying, well, hey, look, you're principled, this is an ideological thing for you, but pragmatically, we need structure. How are we going to protect people? Well, I say, let's look at the history on that. Not only do we not need market structure, we should be repealing existing laws that are in place, like the Bank Secrecy Act. So let's talk about the Bank Secrecy Act, the first major piece of legislation passed by Congress to regulate this financial industry. The Bank Secrecy Act, which includes the Know Your Customer, anti-money laundering laws, all the forms, everything you have to fill out, it costs financial institutions $61 billion a year for compliance. That's not government money. That is passed to us, well, those of us that use banks, in higher fees, lower interest rates, and reduced services. So every time you have to wait 3 days for a wire transfer, or you get asked for an ID to deposit cash, you're experiencing this friction. And in 2023, financial institutions filed over 4 million or what are called suspicious activity reports. And I've talked about this a lot. Any transaction over $10,000, the Treasury Department automatically gets a report. And this floods government databases annually. Okay, well, so what is the argument that was made? The argument that was made at the time for this was the 1970s. It's to stop organized crime. It's to stop money laundering. It's to stop terrorism. Okay, well, how'd that go? Of the suspicious activity reports that are examined, only 4% receive any law enforcement follow-up. 4%. A Bank Policy Institute found that 90 to 95% of people reported in these suspicious activity reports were likely innocent, but their financial lives were flagged and they are permanently recorded for suspicious activity that wasn't reported at all. So billions are spent, millions are surveilled, and the system catches almost nothing. The money laundering goes completely unimpeded. Some examples. Wachovia Bank laundered $378 billion for Mexican and Colombian drug cartels between 2004 and 2007. Not million, billion. The largest Bank Secrecy Act violation in history. They admitted to serious and systemic violations that moved cartel cash through the American financial system for years, while filing all of the required reports. What was the penalty? They paid $1.9 billion in fines, a cost of doing business. The executives who oversaw the laundering, they got promotions, not prison cells. JP Morgan Chase managed Jeffrey Epstein's accounts for years after his 2008 conviction. They paid $290 million to settle claims that they facilitated his trafficking operation. CEO Jamie Dimon still running the bank, and in fact, there was a law that no single U.S. bank could hold more than 10% of the deposits in the United States. That was waived. The largest bank by far in the United States, and blowing through any laws or framework. They are too big to fail. He's still attending Davos, still writing crypto regulations, and still, now actively participating in hijacked Bitcoin. So this is a system that works exactly as designed. Banks launder hundreds of billions, pay fines for continuing to operate, and the executives face no personal consequences. So for anybody, because I know a lot, and I don't blame people for this, because do I expect the average person to realize that, fiat currency is a Ponzi scheme and that these bankers are, the whole system is institutionally captured and so on and so forth? No, I mean, they went to public school, probably got indoctrinated, and believe that there's integrity in the system, and they believe that the government is there to help protect them and keep them safe. They've been taught that, but it's not accurate. So the Bank Secrecy Act is a disaster in terms of friction. It catches almost no crime. The crime that it does catch, people get a slap on the wrist. It's useless. Now, let's contrast that with, say, what happened to Ian Freeman. Ian Freeman operated a Bitcoin exchange in New Hampshire, helping people sell cryptocurrency peer-to-peer. He had an opinion letter from an attorney, which, by the way, is rare and hard to get. Attorneys don't like putting their neck out there. So a lawyer put together an opinion letter stating he didn't need a money transmitter license. So he actually tried to comply with the law, got a lawyer to say he was complying with the law. So he served real people seeking financial privacy and financial freedom, and he processed roughly $10 million in transactions over a few-year period of time. The same government that let Wachovia walk for laundering $378 billion for cartels gave Ian Freeman 8 years in federal prison. The same system that promoted HSBC executives after $881 million in cartel laundering convicted Freeman of unlicensed money transmission, and then his appeal was denied. He still sits today in a federal cage while Jamie Dimon prepares his remarks on responsible stablecoin regulation at Davos. So this entire situation is absurd. We do not need market structure. The market structure that has been put in place increases crime and it punishes innocent people, period. So I'm sick of accepting the argument. Most people accept the argument that, well, of course we need common sense bipartisan legislation. I've seen no evidence of such thing ever having existed, but certainly within this financial realm. So, but there's a deeper question. Even if the members of Congress were saints, which they clearly are not, even if they were honest, competent, and genuinely motivated by public good, they still have no legitimate authority to structure voluntary exchange. When two people agree to trade something value for value, what gives the third party the right to insert themselves in that transaction? And to be clear, what's happening here is very simply a case of, they hijacked Bitcoin and now they want to hijack tokenization. They want to hijack Ethereum. Essentially, you could look at it as this is an attempt to hijack Ethereum in a really simplistic way of looking at it, but to make an analogy, and turn that over to BlackRock and JP Morgan Chase. That's essentially what's going on. And maybe they'll throw a bone to one guy like Brian Armstrong. Maybe there'll be two big exchanges, crypto exchanges, which, by the way, watch. What will end up happening is if this continues, if they're allowed to, if they pass the Clarity Act and they pass all this stuff, Coinbase end up getting acquired by, JP Morgan Chase or Fidelity or one of these other things. And and then in the end, we will have just the same financial institutions, except now the underlying infrastructure is more trackable and more programmable. That's effectively what's going on here. So I'm not going to go through, I could go through a lot of this. I'm not going to talk about Bitcoin again. It'll be in the article just as a rehash, but I'll stick to, other than the fact that Bitcoin will be subject to probably the CFTC based on how this is going. And again, more tracking, more surveillance. There's no upside. There's no good piece of news. So this idea that it's clarity, and clear rules of the road. Well, if the rules are you no longer have any economic freedom or privacy, why are people signing up for clarity? We should be repealing these monstrous regulations that are in place that are ineffective, not adding more. Now, what's interesting is when you look at who's behind these bills. So, and I will show you this now. I'm going to jump off here. And by the way, if you have any questions while we're doing this, feel free to ask, because I know I'm touching on a lot of stuff there, and part of this requires to truly understand it, to walk through some of the history. This article, I'm dumping all of this stuff out. I'm not necessarily expecting a lot of people to read 10,000, 12,000, 14, however long it ends up being. It's the size of half of a book. But I wanted to put it out there for a reference so that people could refer to it and could see the entire thing in context. So rather than just be presented with political propaganda where, well, we've got to do something. Certainly we need rules of the road and all of the other tactics. It's important for people to understand the history of where all this financial regulation came from, what the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of it has been, and even the morality of it to begin with. We need to be having those kinds of questions. We have too many surface questions that assume that the things that came before it were right, just, legal, constitutional, any of those things. And every time, if you've listened to the show a lot, you realize I tend to try to dig and find out what the source is of everything to the extent that I possibly can. And I've never been pleasantly surprised by, oh, wow, this was a well-intentioned, competent thing from the beginning. That hasn't happened yet. I'm looking forward to being surprised one day, but it certainly is not happening with the financial regulations coming out of Congress. Now, when we look at the lobbying, the crypto industry spent $14.6 million lobbying for deals that do one thing: build the surveillance state while crushing any competition that might compete with them. That's what Brian Armstrong is doing. He is the largest funder of this, but you're looking at an entire industry that spent $14.6 million. Now, I'm going to show you on my campaign site, I have put together a bills section. And let me see here if you separate out the window here. All right, good. All right, so there's day2026.com/legislation, or you can just click on bills. Now, what I've done here is something interesting. So I'm analyzing all of these bills from a variety of different dimensions. The most important one is I'm trying to measure where they are on kind of a technocracy scale. So we examine these bills based on surveillance expansion, financial control, identity requirements, the centralization of power, the erosion of due process, corporate state fusion, and emergency powers. And a higher score is worse, right? So 100 is the worst you can get, 0 is the best. This digital assets bill out of the Senate, it gets a 72 out of 100. And the short summary of it is 278 pages of regulatory clarity that builds the surveillance state. And that's effectively what's happening here. And we've talked about, again, all of the stuff that's happened, mandatory surveillance, so on and so forth. DeFi is in the crosshairs. There's a lot of propaganda around DeFi. There are a lot of people saying, oh, this is great. This offers the ability for DeFi to finally exist. It doesn't, because it basically sets a set of criteria and defines DeFi in such a way that almost none of the large players in DeFi actually meet the criteria. So it's DeFi positive in name only. Once you look at what the full criteria are, and I'll go through that maybe if we have time a little bit later. Now, what I've done though, in addition to summarizing the bills in this way, I've indicated who profits, but then we walk through the lobbying war. So who's funding this? I want to know the organizations. I want to know the people. We have to get on board with this. One of the things that drives me nuts on this is we don't know who writes these bills. Cynthia Loomis did not write the Genius Act. I assure you, none of the politicians. Tim Scott did not write any bill. Okay. Well, you can figure out who wrote these bills. And in this instance, we have, for this Clarity Act, for the Senate Market Structure Bill, and I guess this actually is kind of combined for all of the Clarity Act, we have 14.6 million coming from the crypto industry, 56.7 million coming from the banking industry. Guys, they're working together. This is a combined piece of legislation. Now, let's dig deeper. Who is involved in this? So we have 240 former officials in the government. We have 31 from Treasury, 28 from SEC, a bunch from the CFTC, so on and so forth. So again, this is the revolving door. You have a group like the Digital Chamber of Commerce. So these are the people that are involved. And here are the specific names. I won't go through all of them now, but make yourself familiar with these people. These are the people pushing the strings. Again, Tim Scott doesn't know a damn thing about crypto. He didn't write a single word of this bill. These are the people that wrote the bill. And many of these were people that were in government, and now they're out of government, working for crypto firms or working for banks, getting paid a lot of money to pass laws to use the force of the state to suppress innovation and to crush our privacy and freedom in the marketplace. So I'll point out some of the names here. I'll point out one name. We have Larry Summers. Now, Larry Summers is a fascinating guy. He was a former Clinton Treasury Secretary. He was Obama's National Economic Council director. But here's the other fascinating one. It turns out that he came up in the Epstein leaks. Recently, a bunch of emails came up, and he resigned. He was on the board of OpenAI, and he resigned from the board of OpenAI. But it turns out when you dig into this further, Larry Summers was apparently the heir apparent to Jeffrey Epstein. So these are the kinds of people by name that are involved in manipulating the system and in pushing this legislation. Now, I've not seen a lot of people put this kind of information together on a bill. Usually it's just the surface level. Oh, yes, somebody says this is pro-America. They throw a name on it that means the opposite of what's in the bill, and then that's it. There's no depth to it. They then dig into the individual groups themselves, the Digital Chamber of Commerce, Kraken, Ripple. You can look at another big area here, which is just fascinating, is the media. So as I said, I was starting to get, I was like, God, are people that stupid? Is there really this much organic passion about passing surveillance legislation that gives the control of innovative tokenization technology in crypto to banks and like one or two centralized exchanges? Is there really passion about it? So it turns out when you dig through this, and I want to skip ahead to the part of the article so I get this accurate as to exactly who was involved. But you have many of these crypto publications are owned by crypto firms or are substantially run or have substantial advertisers who are beneficiaries of this bill, or these bills, I should say. So, so let me give you an example. So Coinbase spent $14.5 million on advertising across crypto publications in 2024. Same publications that covered Genius as an industry triumph. And, there's nothing illegal about, people buying ads or whatever. That's not the issue. But I noticed this before in crypto during the ICO age. I was actually looking at doing an ICO and looked into what all was involved in it. And back in that time, in like 2017, you basically would pay a crypto publication to write something, to write a positive review, but it looked like it was editorial. It wasn't, here's a sponsored ad. It's, we're going to take somebody that we claim is a journalist, give him $250,000, and then he's going to write a series of articles that look like they're actual investigative journalism to pump your crypto project. So crypto journalism is the worst. I mean, obviously all journalism is bad, but I mean, this stuff doesn't even pretend. There's not a that I'm aware of, highly reputable objective source. And let me give you the breakdown here. Now, all of this is going to be in the article, and so I want you to understand that. But CoinDesk is owned by Digital Currency Group. CoinDesk published 23 articles on Genius between introduction and passage. Zero mention of the fact that DCG's investments are in a compliant stablecoin infrastructure. Zero noted that DCG portfolio companies benefit directly from regulatory barriers that exclude competitors. Zero quoted critics of the surveillance provisions. 14 articles, zero disclosures, perfect compliance. So if you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, CoinDesk, that's like that's the top shelf, that's like the whatever, the Wall Street Journal of crypto, understand this is what you're dealing with. There hasn't been a single article. And by the way, hey, CoinDesk, have me on. I'd love to, let's have a debate. Bring me on for debate. Any of these publications are welcome to have me, have me on if they want to hear the other perspective. But again, they're not interested in providing the perspective. So you may think that the top tier crypto journalists are all for this and therefore it must be good, and understand it's 100% biased because the owners of those publications have a direct vested interest in it. You have Decrypt, which is backed by Consensus, ran 18 features on stablecoin legislation. Consensus, which builds Ethereum that benefits from permitted payment stablecoin designations, appeared in zero conflict of interest disclosures. The coverage consistently framed regulatory clarity as unambiguously good without examining clarity for whom. The Block, venture-backed by crypto funds, their coverage quoted the same 12 industry insiders across 31 articles. The insiders' companies all stood to benefit from Genius passage. The Block's funding comes from firms with identical interests. The circle completes itself. So on and on and on. And I have more examples in here, but this, it was actually very, I came away in some respects relieved by what I learned through this. Because, I guess I bought some of the hype. I'm sitting out here looking at my feed thinking, my God, there's actually big public interest for this. It's all fake. All of the big news stories are fake. And it doesn't stop at just the content itself, which is biased, and they're essentially ads dressed up as journalism. But then there is all kinds of evidence that a lot of the bot activity, which even Musk, I don't rarely give him credit, but when he cut down on some of the bots, a lot of this was related to the fact that whenever something would come up relative to the legislation, you'd see massive spikes. In fact, I want to see if I can get. I had some interesting stats on here. There's so much information in this article that, it probably could be like 10 articles, to be honest, maybe even 16 articles. I'm going to put it out. it once, but then I'm actually going to break this up into different pieces because there are so many interesting facts throughout that are just absolutely mind-boggling. Let me see if I can find the the information relative to. Let's see if media complicity machine. I might be looking at the wrong version of this, but it was something like 100,000 new accounts were created immediately following the beginning of the discussion of some of these bills. Like it's blatant bot activity. And I certainly, if anybody wants to come on the show and take the other side of this or whatever, I'm happy to hear that as well. I'm not finding a lot of takers. I'm going to be on doing more X Spaces. I did something with B in crypto. I'm doing an interview tomorrow. So I am going to be doing some of this, but I don't find it likely that you will find me on CoinDesk. So in any event, I've done this for all of these bills. So you can see the Genius Act. You can see all of these different versions. If you want to see how this actually breaks down, and the beauty of this was just like, okay, everything that I built for OwnNothing to analyze click-wrap agreements, you can kind of take that same knowledge and same understanding and apply it to government bills. So the idea is, again, yeah, I know people aren't going to read a 278-page bill, including the people who vote on it, but it doesn't take that long to read this and to see the conflicts of interest, see who the players are, see a simple score, and understand how this will impact you and your life. So let me hop back here. And again, happy to answer any questions here. We went through the revolving door. But, this is something I've mentioned this. It's immediately inflammatory when you say it. I did the whole America 1.0 is over episode, but we really are delusional about this, because if you look and you say, well, China's got a CBDC, well, what we're talking about by tokenizing these assets centrally, by tokenizing commodities and everything else, not just money, we're talking about tokenizing and centrally controlling 200 times the amount of assets that are controlled in a similar fashion in China. That's what we're talking about here. This is how big this is from a surveillance perspective. So, I've hit on the a lot of the big points here. I mean, I know we're kind of, long into this. The article I've got, I'm just scrolling through it, actually takes a considerable amount of time. But the takeaways here are that this adds surveillance across the board. It empowers more government. It involves real-time analysis of transaction information, sharing that information with foreign governments. It's completely bought and paid for by both the crypto and banking lobbies, who themselves are run by the revolving door of former government officials. And the propaganda is coming from crypto media that is owned by companies that directly benefit from the legislation, who have actually put zero of the alternative view on this. I mean, this happened with the Genius Act. I remember I was on with the Mises Caucus. I did a podcast with them about the Genius Act, and when they had me on, they went to look it up, and I'm like, I was one of the only people that they could find against the Genius Act. They're like, they went to Google or whatever, and the whole first page was all of these, so-called legitimate publications, and then there's me with this Brownstone article, and and people seeing what I'm posting on X. I'm like, why am I the only guy out here? And now I understand why. And the answer is this: one, this is complicated. You already have to know about this stuff and care about this stuff, and there's no money in it, right? I mean, if they're paying, they have a $70 million budget. I don't have a budget. for this. There's no there's no ROI for me to do this, other than the ROI for me to do this is that technocracy is a threat, fundamental threat to free will. And if we lose that, we lose everything. This is why I don't care about whatever the economic gains may or may not be. I mean, I'll see people, well, hey, listen, if this legislation happens, at least the number will go up. It's like, if you've given up your privacy and ownership of your assets for a temporary increase, which may not even happen in your crypto holdings, that's not a good trade-off. But again, I'm not blaming anybody for this, because I'm realizing that this information is not available anywhere. As I've said, I've spoken to these people in Congress directly, in person. I've given them my book. They do not understand any of the technical aspects of crypto. They don't understand any of the history of crypto. They have been persuaded by maybe wealthy people in crypto that, tell them a good story, and they haven't seen any other information. And I've got to say, this is kind of like with Bitcoin. Do I really blame a politician for not knowing that Bitcoin was hijacked if the guy that knew the most about it was thrown in prison and nobody ever got distribution of his book? How would they know about it? Now, they're still wrong. They shouldn't be legislating this. They shouldn't be putting out a, allegedly pro-crypto agenda without knowing what it's about. This is why government shouldn't regulate these things to begin with. But I do understand how we got here. So the question then is, what do we do about it? So, like I said, this article that I am putting out so far, I'm hoping I'm not going to add more, but it has 48 references. It has 16 sections. It goes through a whole variety of things. And there is one section that I am going to go through because it's not about the technical aspects of the legislation. It's about how to actually view the political process itself and how to view political propaganda. And so I want to kind of dispel what these terms mean when you hear them. So I'm going to walk through some of these because I think this is really important. And I'm going to turn this into memes. I want to try to make this funny. I want to try to make it catchy just so that we can start framing the debate. Because I remember I got on here and I did my podcast. You'll see I was pretty passionate when I was watching C-SPAN and watching them debate the Genius Act. It was just propaganda after propaganda. I'm like, are these people really that clueless? But Orwell had a quote: political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. And, Orwell nailed it 80 years ago. Politicians don't lie the way normal people lie. Normal people lie at that bar. Politicians lie through vocabulary itself. They've built an entire dialect where every virtuous word means its opposite, where protection means control, clarity means complexity, and innovation means asking permission. So here's kind of the decoder ring on this. And, I'm not tying this into, my political campaign because, as you know, I'm just here to raise awareness about technocracy and our crypto political prisoners. But when somebody says bipartisan, this is great bipartisan legislation. Bipartisan means when lobbyists on both sides of the aisle have figured out how to get paid. Bipartisan is when the banking lobby and the crypto lobby have come up with an acceptable deal to both sides and gotten paid. Bipartisan doesn't mean both parties agree to something that's good for you. It means both parties receive sufficient contributions to stop arguing. When legislation moves fast with wide margins, you're not witnessing democracy overcoming division. You're witnessing the moment the checks were cleared. By what authority do they claim your bipartisan approval? You weren't consulted. You weren't involved. And so this is very much the case, as we've discussed with the Genius and Clarity Act. Regulatory clarity itself means clear lines of fire for prosecution. Clarity in Washington never means making things easier for you. It means making enforcement easier for them. Every time they promise to clarify the rules, they're drawing cleaner sight lines for the agencies that will prosecute you. The fog wasn't the problem. The fog was your cover. Who gave them the authority to illuminate your affairs? Nobody you elected to protect you. So that is a big deal here with the Genius and Clarity Act. It divides crypto into 3 state-approved categories: digital commodities, investment contract assets, and permitted payment stablecoins. So every exchange, broker, and dealer must register with the appropriate agency or face prosecution. So you're no longer in a regulatory gray zone. You're in a neatly mapped kill zone. They didn't turn on the lights to help you see. They turned on the lights so the snipers could aim. Clear rules of the road. Clear rules for who gets crushed under the wheels. When politicians promise clear rules of the road, they're not building a highway for you. They're building a toll road owned by their donors. The rules are clear: pay up or get run over. The road leads exactly where they want it to lead, which is through institutions that file reports to the government and pay lobbyists to write the next set of rules. Who authorized this road? Who asked if you wanted to travel in it? Consumer protection, that's the other big one. Consumer protection is surveillance rebranded as a public service. They are not protecting consumers from risk. They're protecting incumbents from competition. The consumer gets protected right into a system where every transaction is logged, every counterparty identified, and every pattern fed into government databases. Protected from what? From privacy, from options, from escape. Market structure. Market structure is a rigged system with official blessing. Markets don't need structure. We talked about this earlier. Markets emerge through voluntary exchange. When politicians claim to structure a market, they're not organizing chaos. They're deciding who wins and who loses before the game starts. The structure isn't a framework, it's a fix. By whose authority do they presume to structure voluntary exchange between consenting adults? Another one of these phrases, industry input. Industry input is a theatrical hearing where the script was written months ago. Congressional hearings aren't investigations, they're performances. The witness list is curated, the questions are pre-approved. The input that matters happened in lobbying firm offices before the first gavel fell. The hearing exists so congressmen can clip videos for the campaign ads and so lobbyists can justify their retainers. Your input was never in the script. You weren't cast as an extra. You were the laugh track. Responsible innovation. Responsible innovation is innovation that has been declawed, defanged, and asks permission before existing. Responsible means obedient. Innovation means whatever survives the compliance gauntlet. When they praise responsible innovation, they're praising innovators who don't threaten anyone powerful, who file the right forms, and who hire the right lobbyists. The irresponsible innovators, the one who actually change things, get prosecuted. Then the prosecution becomes the justification for more rules requiring more responsibility. So here's the question nobody asked. Who gave them the authority to define responsible? No one. They took it. Financial inclusion is mandatory surveillance rebranded as access. So financial inclusion sounds like helping the poor access the banking system. It's actually about eliminating the last spaces where people can transact without government observation. The unbanked often chose that status deliberately, preferring cash privacy to digital tracking. Including them means forcing them onto monitored rails. Welcome to the system. We've been watching you. Who asked if they wanted to be included? So here's the quick thumbnail decoder ring for political speech. Bipartisan means the lobbyists got paid. Clarity equals clear lines of fire. Clear rules equals roadkill. Protection equals surveillance. Structure equals rigged. Input equals theater. Responsible equals obedient. And inclusion equals conscription. So lastly, before we open this up to Q&A, I do want to talk about the war on crypto. This whole thing to me, so remember we had the war on crypto as the whole premise, Trump declaring that the war on crypto was over. I would argue the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, these 4 bills actually extend the war on crypto. He still has an opportunity to end the war on crypto, but he hasn't. He's doubled down on the war on crypto. And I hope by now, with my description of these bills, and I encourage you to view the bills yourself. Certainly, I've put together these tools to analyze these bills, but read them yourself, understand them yourself, and It's in your best interest to do so, given that if this passes, then in a very short period of time, everything that you own is going to be able to be centrally controlled and programmed and censored by multiple third parties, including foreign central banks. So in this entire context with the war on crypto, and I'm grateful that Ross was pardoned, but we still have Ian Freeman waking up in a federal prison this morning. His crime was selling Bitcoin to willing buyers without demanding their papers first, after having gotten a letter from an attorney saying he didn't need to get their papers first. And I've compared his situation to what happened with Jeffrey Epstein and JP Morgan Chase. It's not even close. Roman Storm, his prosecution exposes the regime's next target, privacy software itself. He was convicted on August the 6th for writing code, not for using it, not for promoting it, but for writing it. Again, the war on crypto is not over. We are adding massive surveillance while throwing people who wrote open source code to protect our Fourth Amendment right. We're throwing those people in prison. Storm's co-defendant, Alexei Pertsev, was sentenced to 64 months in the Netherlands. It's not American overreach. It's coordinated international persecution of privacy developers. Understand, it is global. I actually saw Alexei Pertsev speak when I was in Amsterdam. The U.S. has a very long arm, as we certainly saw with Roger Ver as well. Tornado Cash processed over $7 billion in transactions before the Treasury Department sanctioned the protocol in August of 2022. The Treasury later delisted the smart contracts in March of 2025, but the prosecution still continued. Storm still awaits sentencing and had he was in the Southern District of New York. The whole thing was stacked. He's not even from New York. Like, it literally is a rigged game. Now, Tornado Cash operates autonomously through immutable smart contracts. Storm cannot control who uses the protocol any more than Satoshi controls who uses Bitcoin. The code runs itself. But compare this to the amount of money that we talked about earlier with Wachovia and HSBC. We're not even on a similar scale. So mathematics doesn't negotiate with senators. It runs on every node in every country beyond every jurisdiction. The function executes whether Roman Storm is free or incarcerated. The prosecution is theater. The code is permanent. Keone Rodriguez and William Hill learned that building privacy tools makes you an enemy of the state. The Samurai Wallet founders were arrested April of 2024 and charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering. Rodriguez was sentenced to 5 years on November the 6th. This is very recent. Hill got 4 years on November the 19th, 2025. What was their crime? Honest marketing. Rodriguez and Hill advertised privacy is a feature. Samurai's website promoted transaction mixing and IP address protection. In the regime's view, advertising privacy proves criminal intent. Meanwhile, every bank in America advertises security while handing your data to the government on request. Chase promises to protect what matters. Wells Fargo sells, quote, peace of mind. They're advertising the opposite of what they deliver. Rodriguez and Hill advertise exactly what they delivered. They're in prison for it. Prosecuting Rodriguez for Samurai is like prosecuting the inventor of curtains because someone changed clothes with the blinds closed. The software was non-custodial. Rodriguez and Hill never held user funds. They couldn't stop specific transactions any more than the curtain maker can stop you from undressing. So build privacy tools, go to prison. And I'm not going to talk about Roger's case, but I will say this. All 5 of these men should be pardoned. Freeman, Storm, Rodriguez, Hill, and Ver. None of them should be in cages or under prosecutorial control from Trump's DOJ. The war on crypto is not over. This is the war on crypto. These were the innovators. These were the people that promoted freedom, voluntary trade, privacy, and were honest in their dealings. The fact that these people are still in under these circumstances is a clear sign that the war on crypto is not over. So again, I'm going to dig further because I don't know if if anybody's out here listening to this, do you disagree with me? Do you sell me the idea that the war on crypto is over? If you believe the war on crypto is over, what is your argument for this belief? Do you believe that this complete financial surveillance and control of money and all of your assets and the expansion of the federal government and data collection is winning the war on crypto? Do you believe that open source developers promoting privacy and writing open source code, being in prison, is winning the war on crypto? I want to understand the argument. I study this a lot. I've dug through, I've read these bills, and I think I've got a pretty good handle on this, and I'm not seeing what the optimism is or what the case is even for the U.S. even progressing on this. What we're progressing and what we're becoming the dominant player in is financial surveillance. That is the area in which the U.S. is excelling, just like we excel in two other areas: the largest national defense and the highest or second highest now incarceration rate. Are winning in crypto may be related to financial censorship and financial surveillance. I don't think that's a win, nor do I think that that's particularly American, but I guess people could debate those ideas as well. So look, what are we going to do about this? I can even go on. Cynthia Loomis. I mean, she didn't write the Genius Act. Coin Center did. And the cryptocurrency industry's $21.55 million in lobbying wasn't a donation, it was an invoice. And so let's look at what happened here. So Loomis owns Bitcoin, not through an ETF or a fund. She holds it directly. And she championed the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, a proposal requiring the U.S. Treasury to purchase Bitcoin and hold it for 20 years. The theory, it will pay off the national debt. So the math, Bitcoin would need to go up 50x from current prices, while the government that debased the dollar 96% since 1913 suddenly becomes a competent long-term investor. The reality is that Loomis is asking American taxpayers to pump her portfolio. She is the Republican Nancy Pelosi, except Pelosi had the decency to trade stocks on inside information. Loomis wrote legislation requiring the government to buy her assets. That's not insider trading. That's actually capture with extra steps. And it's not just one bill. It is a coordinated legislative assault. And we've gone through the crypto side, and I've got even more data. Again, this thing is rich with data. I told you I'd bring the receipts. That when you see the article, we've got the name of who all of the banker lobbyists are, who the crypto side is, the whole, all of it. All of it's there. I mean, it's not hard information to get, but it turns out the crypto publications that are owned by these crypto firms aren't publishing this. Who would publish this information? CNBC? So, in the end, here's what happened. So 76 organizations registered to lobby on digital asset legislation in 2024. So this isn't democracy. This is a silent auction that we weren't invited to. Here's what the winners got. The banks got protection from stablecoin competition. And they got this through interest prohibition. So if you have a stablecoin, you can't earn interest. Coinbase and Circle got a regulatory moat that eliminates smaller competitors. Traditional finance got guaranteed custody contracts on every digital dollar. The CFTC and the SEC got expanded jurisdiction and budgets. And compliance attorneys got a guaranteed revenue stream. By the way, some of the law firms involved in this, I even lay this out, they earn $2,000 an hour for this work. Here's what the losers got. Privacy developers got prison sentences. Small builders got compliance costs they can't afford. Users got surveillance infrastructure on every transaction. And taxpayers got a senator's portfolio pump disguised as policy. So Loomis keeps on calling the Genius Act historic. And she's right. It's the first time in American history that a senator wrote legislation requiring the government to consider buying assets she personally owns, while simultaneously creating a regulatory framework guaranteeing her donors control of the market, while the banks that caused the 2008 and the crypto companies that claimed to oppose them jointly drafted the implementation rules. That is indeed historic. So anyway, with that said, I know this was a lot. There's actually quite a bit more, but I'll save this for the release of the article. But in my opinion, this is pretty cut and dried. I would love to see the counter arguments. I'm waiting for people to state their case. There have been some people that have. I've been going on. I'm now, I wouldn't say trolling lobbyists, but I'm cutting, pasting sections of this article and putting it as a response to some of these lobbyists that are putting out the pro-pop, and they will not engage. Even though my responses are actually getting decent reaction, not a single one of them has engaged. So we will take note of that. Maybe I'll come up with a scoreboard. Maybe I'll just put all their faces on here and we'll do a public display of outreach to each of these people and ask them a series of questions publicly and see what their answers are. This is a complete scam. It is a complete AstroTurf fabricated scam. There is no large-scale public support. Now, generally speaking, there's no awareness. I mean, the truth of the matter is, I'm also not saying there's an army of people that are opposed to it. Realistically, it's complicated. It's Congress. Most people have lives. The people are trying to put food on the table, given the declining value of the dollar and everything else and tariffs. So people don't have a lot of time for this, but there isn't organic support for it. It's all fake. So I don't know what we do with this, but what I will say is this time, and I've on this podcast in the past, I've said I'm not ready, to do some of the bigger interviews. We've talked in the past about Tucker Carlson or some of these other platforms. And I didn't want to do those in part for a few reasons. One, having gone around the country and given countless interviews, done countless podcasts, my own and others, I realized that a lot of this information is almost too removed. So it's kind of people like, they tune it out entirely. They don't even have a framework. But the other thing is I've given a lot of talks and, people, the responses that scared the shit out of me. That's kind of an exact response that I get, which is not, it's the truth. You should be frightened. If you listen to what I said and you fact check what I said and you look into these bills and it turns out what I said is true and you confirm it, you should probably be pretty frightened. But my goal isn't to go around frightening people. My goal is, once you understand all of this, you realize you're not going to win playing in this game. You have to exit these systems. This is why we need privacy coins like Xano. We need algorithmic privacy stable coins like Freedom Dollar to counter stable coins and CBDCs. We need marketplaces, medical tourism marketplaces like OSARA, so that you can get out of insurance that doesn't actually protect you from catastrophic care, and on and on and on and on. We need to build all of those things. But now I am ready to take this particular message as far as we can, as quickly as we can. And the reason is, one, I think we now actually have some solutions. So it's not all fear. There's a lifeboat. Because if you go to somebody, it's like, hey, everything that you thought about how these things works was a lie and you're screwed. And then you don't provide them an outlet, you're actually contributing to kind of their paralysis. They're going to be probably more likely in that instance to just kind of throw their hands up. I've seen that happen. I've heard people say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. We'll wait for our AI overlords and, whatever. There's almost a whole set of propaganda around that. There is hope. There is always hope. And we do have free will, but we have to exercise it, and we have to exercise it now. So now I am ready to roll this out. So I'm going to try to go to Tucker Carlson and wherever. I'm going to continue to expand to get as large of an audience as possible, because the reason is once all of our assets are digitally tokenized and can be programmed and shut off and controlled, everything that we own, we've lost any leverage or any ability to negotiate, and it makes it a lot more difficult to exit and build. And we are now reaching that point. 2026 is the year we have to onboard enough people. And again, you're never going to get this isn't a mass audience. I'm not expecting a 50% awakening. We're just at that stage where we need early adopters. But in order to get enough early adopters, we need to cast a bigger net. So here's the thing. Everything that I'm doing, everything that we're doing here, this is authentically me. Obviously, it's not, this isn't the most polished, podcast or whatever that you're going to find. But this is me authentically communicating what I'm learning. And I'm not going to use their tactics. I think the thing that we have is authenticity. So, it's interesting. I ended up getting on to Mike Adams' show on the Decentralized TV because somebody I know on Telegram reached out to him and said, "Hey, I think you might be interested in, what this guy has to say." He wrote this book about CBDCs. And that's how that happened. That's how I got introduced to Mike. And now I've had Mike on multiple times. Mike has had me on multiple times. We're collaborating on things. And it just happened because, somebody who's not like, he's not part of Mike's team. He's literally just somebody who's been a fan of Mike's and who watches the show. And that's how that came about. I have not done any outbound reach or marketing. All of the podcasts that I've done, everything that's happened so far has happened organically, and I want to continue to do that. But it does help. So for those of you that are like, "Wow, I wish this message would get to more people." If you have some places that you think that I should, venues I should be on, I encourage you to authentically, in your own voice, reach out to those people. Send them an email. Send them a note on social media. That's, I know I actually get probably 4 or 5 requests a day for people who want to be a guest on this show. And this keeps on increasing. And you know what? You're usually horrible. It's, it's somebody who has they have some agent, or they've created a fake AI agent or whatever. And it's like, it's like, "Oh, well, I really watched your show and we think this would be a great fit based on your show." And then it proceeds to list somebody who would be completely irrelevant based on the themes of the show. Right. And so that's fake. I don't respond to that. Right. This is what is happening right now. So if you guys, in your own voice, can help, when this article, somebody asked, where will your article be published? I believe it'll be published on Brownstone. I hope it'll be published on Brownstone. They've published all my stuff so far. I hope so. I'm pretty sure Brownstone will publish it. So that is my preferred venue. I think Brownstone is a great venue for this. Frankly, it's one of the only places around that actually publishes the truth and controversial topics. And so they're certainly getting targeted right now by Politico and by the mainstream press and everything else. I just saw something. It's always funny to see the way they try to characterize Jeffrey Tucker and everything like that. So my preference would be, and I think it'll probably be the Brownstone Institute. And hopefully, Brownstone has big reach now on all their channels and their emails. And so part of the thing is, I've been writing this article. I've actually probably been writing this article for months. In fact, Jeffrey often says, "Well, when are you going to write something?" Because it's been 9 months. So this is actually kind of the culmination of a lot of our episodes, a lot of the research that I've been doing for months. And the reason that now is the timing is just how quickly it's accelerated without opposition. I mean, they're now saying it could pass. I mean, it was supposed to pass the Senate Finance Committee last Thursday, so it didn't. Now we have a month. So we have a month based on what's going on with Davos and with the way that all the stuff, we have a month to get the information out, but we have to do it authentically. We're not going to do it with bots. We're not going to do it with fake, but I need your help. I need your help sharing this podcast. I need your help sharing the article, and I need your help trying to connect me directly. I mean, I can reach out to people. I know how to reach out to, for instance, Tucker Carlson, 4 or 5 different ways. I'll think about how to do that. But the best part of it is if it's authentic, and I want to continue that trend, because now that you see through it, now that you know that most of these articles are fake, actually authenticity can go a long way. Authenticity and actually just the willingness to take action. So I think this is a window to expose all of this, to expose that, unfortunately, I love crypto as a tool for freedom and now in this privacy sector, but most of crypto has been compromised. And now you're seeing the unholy alliance of big banks and big crypto exchanges. And there's confusion because people view the big crypto exchange as being that, crypto for the little guy. And it's not that. This guy's just trying to get his seat at the table at Davos. And so we have to point that out, but they don't have real, they don't have real support. They only have fabricated support. And I'm going to continue to track down and do what I can to identify and prove increased bot activity as well. I mean, we just need to destroy this fake narrative. I mean, you put all this together, Larry Summers and 200 different, former government executives in the revolving door and all this stuff. It's just, it's all there. And it's not like it was hard. This is public information. I mean, these firms have to register. So it's not like I went James O'Keefe and, went underground and, did a sting operation here. This information is available. It's just that most people don't look at it and put it together. And admittedly, this is kind of the articles, I'm trying to make it not dry, but it is long. But it's going to be the reference material. And then off of that reference material, we can plug away at the different pieces. And hey, you know what? We've got Technocracy Atlas now. Maybe we take some of the tools that we have at Technocracy Atlas and apply it on this, on some of these bills and some of this legislation, and track down, who's writing these bills. I've always thought people should be asking who's writing the bills. That should be something that is knowledge that is required to be known. And I don't know if people care enough, but in this particular case, once you see that your Brian Armstrong is there, he's now trying to negotiate. They're trying to negotiate the terms over, will stable coins be permitted to have interest or not? And they've already structured it through the Genius Act so that, essentially it's easier for regulated banks to become stablecoin issuers. It's much more difficult, if not impossible, for a new entrant. So banks have already gotten a leg up by being in a preferred position to even be able to legally issue stablecoins. And now they're fighting over this other thing. Well, the whole point of crypto is peer-to-peer voluntary exchange, freedom, and the ability for people all over the world to be able to engage in commerce, not the ability for one or two people to sell out everybody else and become a banker. So anyway, so Leah writes, I'd love to see you as a guest on the Corbett Report again. I did ask him to have you on. I hope he saw it and does. Yeah, I actually just did an interview with Ernie Hancock. I've been on with Ernie, I don't know, 6 or 7 times, and consider Ernie a good friend. And Ernie is on once a week or once every other week with Corbett. So, I mean, I could ask him, and we had a great interview. So, my guess is he'd probably be up for it. So that's a great suggestion. I will reach out. And if you want to join the live convo, I'm putting the link in now. I'm realizing I'm now getting notes that there are people waiting for this link. So here's the link to the live chat if you want to join. Certainly you can continue to type in your questions or comments. Hopefully that wasn't too redundant. It was tough for me because I was jumping around the various aspects of the article. And there are so many different things that I want to talk about. I think the framing, though, of this political language, if I hear clear rules of the road and common sense bipartisan, what is common sense? Give me an example of what a common sense bipartisan piece of legislation is that didn't fleece the American people. I'd love to see one example, a single example. So, all right, bear with me 1 second. Oh, and again, a reminder, go to ownnothing.org and you can pick your favorite anthem for OwnNothing.org. We have 4 different choices up there. And, every 100 people that vote, I'm going to give away $25 worth of Freedom Dollar. So that's another big benefit as well. Let me, I sent this to a lot of people. Hold on. I'm trying to find, oh, this is crazy. All right, there we go. Hey, Craig, how are you?
Good, Aaron. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, good. No echo?
Not yet. We're good.
Okay, good. Give it time. I'm sure we'll find a way to make an echo.
We cracked the code. Season 3 was the key.
Great job tonight. Good stuff. Great job on the CFTC and SEC stuff out of the gate, too. I've dealt a lot with more of the CFTC, but good stuff in there. That was great. Good background on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I know people don't, most people don't have a background in this. And so I know the odds are against this because you got to give a lot of the backstory here.
Well, and I think you're right. The CFTC seems to be gaining power because it's the commodity side of things, right? This SEC is the security side. The CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Commission, they're the commodity side of it. And that's what this stuff is going to fall under, is the commodity. So we have to watch that pretty closely to see, what's going on with it and who's falling in, what the infrastructure is behind behind all that too. How big is it going to grow and how are they going to support it? And so we'll be watching that.
And certainly nobody's taking the position of we want it under our wing so that we can reduce the size of government.
Right. That's right. They're all taking it saying, how much money can we get from this? How much revenues can we generate from this?
I think the real-time surveillance and connection with foreign central banks is just, and the other thing is, I will say, I didn't put this in the list of political terms, but the longer this goes on, the worse the legislation is going to be. This is kind of like whenever there's a government shutdown, people get excited about a government shutdown. And then in order to stop the government shutdown, they usually have to increase spending because they have to buy off some congressman. So it's like this guy, yeah, we'll reopen the government, which was about, the original purpose was to cut the budget, but we're going to reopen it by giving this guy an airport, right? It's so I've never seen this work out where the people benefit the longer the negotiations go on.
Yeah. Well, as they say, the Christmas tree bills, it starts off a Charlie Brown Christmas tree and it ends up Rockefeller Square.
That's a good one. All right. Let's see. I know Dan said he wanted to, Dan O'Neill was going to pop in. We have, and I sent a lot of these. I'm trying to sort through the list here. Yeah, I think, I maybe using the Technocracy Atlas or figuring out to relate it to the fact that we're talking about the next Technocracy Roundtable being about free speech. And given the podcast that we did together about free speech, I think this tracking of these publications and their funding, I knew that these crypto publications were largely funded by insiders, but man, when I got to doing the analysis, it's like, yeah, 31 articles in favor, 0 against, not a single interview. And this was what was troubling me. I'm like, how is this crypto industry so stupid? Do these people really not understand this, that they're not even addressing the financial surveillance angle? And it turns out that the reason is that, no one with that viewpoint was permitted to publish. And my guess is that a lot of the traffic for these crypto publications is also fake. I'm not even kidding about this. So I looked at doing an ICO in 2017. And at the time, there was like a whole process for this. And it would cost anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 to do an ICO. And what you had to do was you would have to get a smart contract. You would have to get the smart contract audited. Then you would have to pay for exchange listings. And then you would have to pay as part of the package. And there were even companies that would bundle up all of these different pieces as part of a solution. You would buy articles in these major crypto publications, not ads, articles written by supposed journalists. So crypto has never. I'm unaware of an objective crypto publication. I don't think such a thing exists, and so of course, I guess it just didn't dawn on me that here we are almost 10 years later, and I guess they didn't all of a sudden become Woodward and Bernstein. They've continued in their ways, and so I want to dig into learning how to figure out how much of their traffic is bot traffic. Because, by the way, if you've noticed this as well, some of these things, you go to the comments now, and clearly the comments are bots. They're just like and basically whatever they told the language model is, hey, take whatever the quote is and make a positive affirming statement about it that's only one sentence long. Right. And it's just because the comments are trash. They're just like, it's there to be a compliment to collect followers or to provide social proof to boost the original post. I want to dig in on that. I want to really learn how that works because I think the number of people that are actually supporting this bill or any of these bills is incredibly small.
Well, like we were talking about, it's it has been covered, right? I have seen Loomis and a few others on Bloomberg or CNBC talking about this, but they don't go into depth. It's almost like they're just covering it, right? They're just covering the headline and very briefly below the surface. So that way there's no real understanding of it. Nobody really knows what to ask about it. Like you said, they change it to the market structure bill, which is confusing because people are watching the Genius Act. Anybody who's sort of watching this, they're watching the Genius Act, they're prepared for the Clarity Act, and then they come out with a new name for it. And it's almost like it's a very clear intent to not pick up on what this is, and then obviously we have Greenland going on, we have Davos going on, we've got Trump suing JP Morgan, right? We got plenty of other things that distract us headlines, and I'm sure there'll be another one tomorrow morning, you know what I mean, and another one this weekend, and another one on Monday and Tuesday. Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, when do we circle back? Ukraine, Russia, there would be a one, right? Solve Ukraine, Russia, whatever that means. And it's complete distraction away from this. And this is really significant. I mean, what you're covering here, I think, is very, very foundational as to where we're headed over the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, this is very, very significant, what this bill and the work you're doing on this. So I think it's being covered up.
I want to figure out how to take this long article and put it into memes and simplify the explanations. And there's so, when I'm writing the thing, I'm like, oh, what if they don't understand what a commodity is? And then I start putting in examples, and then it's like 100 pages. So that's not going to help either, because you can simplify it, but if your simplification of it requires that much time, then you actually have done yourself a disservice. So it's tough trying to figure out how to take this material, but I'm okay with doing one foundational article and then doing smaller things off of it, but where you can always point back to this as being the framework. Because I don't know of any. I don't know of another one like that. I haven't seen a comprehensive analysis from this perspective. I ran my article through a different AI to see how it evaluated it, right? To see, and it's like, well, Grok was trying to tell me I wasn't being objective about it, and then it started using rules of the road. It actually started using some of those political terms, and so I'm like, are you kidding me? You want me to believe? You want me the premise to be that I should accept what the other side at face value, that these political terms actually mean what they say? Provide the evidence for that. There's no evidence to believe in these things. So anyway, but I couldn't find any other real comprehensive research. And part of it is that one of these, this last bill was just released last night. But again, nobody has an economic incentive to challenge this. I mean, I guess maybe people that are shorting something, although I don't even know how that would play out, because what would you be shorting? I don't think this bill is good for crypto.
Yeah, that's hard for me because I don't, I trade a lot of markets. I've got, 30 to 50 markets that I trade, and they're all commodities. I mostly trade commodities, from metals to crude oil to the debt markets. Well, you could call that financials, but they're still in the commodity realm. The futures markets are, and equity markets, those fall under the CFTC, and the futures markets, futures commodities. But you're right. Like, I don't know who would be incentivized to trade this. I mean, remember, the Bitcoin and Ethereum are both traded they were put under the futures window, but it was impossible to trade, right? Because Bitcoin was 5 Bitcoin. So you had to post, like, at the beginning when they first made Bitcoin a futures market that could trade. One, it didn't make sense because it closed at 5 o'clock on Friday and Bitcoin kept trading all weekend. So you'd get these brutal, if you carried a position over the weekend, you would get a gap up in Bitcoin would make a move over the weekend, and you'd be screwed with a gap in the market, right? Because you're closed from Friday until Sunday night till the futures markets open back up, for 48 hours or so.
Yep.
That was number one. Number two, you'd had to post like $100,000 in margin to trade one Bitcoin futures contract, which is insanity. Like, why would you do that? When, and now granted, you were getting 5 Bitcoin. So you were, but normally the concept behind futures markets is, you post up a margin. And that allows you to trade, 62,000 bushels of wheat for $1,500, and so, and you have different components to that market. You have speculators, small speculators, large speculators, and then you have commercials and hedgers. And they basically, the commitment of traders, there's a commitment of traders report that comes out and breaks that stuff down. And it tells you where are the small speculators, where are the large hedgers, and where are the big commercial interests, like the Cargills, or, so you've got the Cargills, you've got the hedge funds, and then you have the small speculators. And a farmer would even fall under the category of a small speculator. So a farmer's got, a 100-acre farm, and he thinks he's going to pull out, however many bushels of soybeans or wheat or corn or whatever it is. And he'll look out into the future and say, well, gosh, I'll take $6 a bushel for my corn because my input costs are $2.50. I'll lock that in today. You know what I mean? I'll lock that in. So he sells that. He sells a futures contract out in the future to hedge his future production. That way he can lock in his $3 of gain. And he's like, look, as long as I deliver this corn or this wheat or whatever it is, I'm going to get paid, and I don't have any risk, right? So even they fall under the category of a small speculator. And so so if you think about that and take that concept with the farm and the commodities and the corn and stuff like that, and a farmer, and now you take it over to a financial instrument like Bitcoin, and you think, like, who has the interest to sell that futures contract and defend that position? I don't know of anybody, Aaron. I don't know of anybody, like you said, I don't know of anyone who's willing to take a stance on this. There's just, I don't know who it is. Maybe a hedge fund or something like that, but.
Well, I posted earlier today. I said, maybe we can settle this situation about the banks versus the exchanges. If everybody takes their money out of JP Morgan, everybody takes their money out of Coinbase, their crypto off of Coinbase, and let's see how solvent they are.
Wouldn't it be nice to have that voice? If you get on Tucker, you could say that. Maybe that's but you got to do it in mass. Otherwise it's just a couple. We're just a couple fools taking our money out. It has no impact. So.
We know that used to be a thing in crypto. Every year, people would stress test exchanges, and I can't even remember what the date was, but that was actually a normal thing. That's gone. I mean, but that was like Eric Voorhees and OGs that have a lot of crypto would do that. Would do that every year. That was a normal practice. These exchanges aren't required to have reserves. If you look at the history of crypto exchanges, they're not. It's not great. Most of even the big ones tend to collapse either through hacks or rug pulls. And I don't think there's a requirement that they even be full. That they have full reserves, right? I mean, that's not even a requirement. Although to say that, it's like, well, banks don't either, right? So
well, the way it works on the future side, and you were talking about this a little bit at the beginning, the surveillance component of it, there is some logic to, all the components in the chain. So when we're talking about those different, the commercials or the large hedgers or speculators or the small speculators, you have a broker, and that broker is going to hold capital, right? So they're a buffer for the exchange, right? So the exchange, their job is to match the buyer and the seller, right? It used to be a physical contract. Now it's just an electronic digital contract. It's been that way for, at least 20 years, 25 years, pretty much. since the floor went away, and in mass, right, when it went away in mass. And then what happens is you get these, these components in the middle, these futures, what are they called? Basically entities where, people trade through, they're brokers. And so they have to hold certain amounts of capital, and they're in charge, and so what it does, it provides a huge buffer for the exchange. Because if somebody blows up, right, if a small speculator, a large hedge fund or something blows up, it goes back to that's who it is, FCM, your futures clearing merchant. And so that's who they're surveilling. In theory, that's who, if they were to come out and defend, if someone were to come out, like you said, you challenge someone to come out and make a defense on this. If someone were to come out and make a defense, that's one of the places you would go, is you would say, well, we have to have surveillance over this because that's our layers of protection. You know what I mean? We have to have this futures clearing merchant in there. It's going to provide this layer of protection for the exchange so that the exchange doesn't blow up. Only some small entity below basically provides a buffer for that hedge fund or whoever who had. And we had this happen with John Corzine. Remember him? Yep. He was a Goldman Sachs guy. Then he went to
MF.
MF Global, right? And essentially the futures market had never really had a chance of blowing up until he got a hold of it. And he went past all the regulatory, again, rules for thee, not for me. He was able to go buy all that stuff and essentially try to, exert his will over a market, and he got crushed, and it just locked up. There were a lot of brokerages that were essentially insolvent for a couple years, and because they just locked everything down, people couldn't access their money. So that would be the case, right? A guy like him, that would be the case as to why we need to add surveillance to all this stuff. Well, however,
so the whole point of decentralized finance is you don't have any of that risk, because you actually have people, you can use the technology and have people engage peer-to-peer.
Right.
And so part of the agenda here is to kill DeFi, because DeFi is a threat to all of these custodians and all of these middlemen, which of course was the original point of crypto, was to disintermediate and get rid of these third parties. So it's now an attack. They're trying to make it like DeFi is the risk. DeFi is a risk because their system is inefficient, has third parties, has all these buffers, has all of this other stuff, and it's unnecessary with the new technology. And so they want to shut that down. And in fact, I was going to say, this is the most contentious part, because there are a lot of people that are like, oh, well, is DeFi going to be okay? And so I want to pull up, if I can find it in this article. It's not easy to, let me try to, the search function here, what the criteria are for being considered truly decentralized. So, this is what people that don't understand politics, they don't realize that once they put in the infrastructure and the surveillance, they can make rule changes without even making law changes, and can wipe out all. So they might sell you on the fact that, oh yeah, we'll do a carve out right now, but to override that carve out is something that they can do with the flick of a pen in the future. And they don't realize that they're being set up and groomed for this. So I don't know why anybody in DeFi would, based on the whole purpose of DeFi, want to engage with the government, but that's, neither here nor there. So let me try to find, here we are. All right, here we go. Oh, I said they called it the Clarity Act because the DeFi Destruction and Developer Imprisonment Act was focus grouped poorly. Gotta make sure I'm looking at the right. All right, here we go. So here we go. The decentralized exemption that isn't. So to qualify as decentralized under Clarity, a protocol must meet specific tests. No single entity can have unilateral control. No issuer can have meaningful influence over operations. The governance must be genuinely distributed. Well, so if you look at that and then you look at the actual DeFi protocols, you have Uniswap Labs, which controls the most front-end interface for most user access. Aave has a core development team. Compound has a governance token. So in reality, the big players in DeFi are not exempt. And so again, this is one of those things where they'll pay lip service. What's the term that they use? Grin fuck. They'll grin fuck you as they're doing the negotiations, and they'll say, oh yeah, here, we've got this little carve out for you. And then all of a sudden at the last minute, they add one little sentence and it wipes out all of DeFi. What do you think? What leverage does DeFi have at this table here? They have none, because there's nobody advocating for DeFi. Coinbase isn't advocating for DeFi. Coinbase is a centralized exchange. They want DeFi to be defined in a way that benefits them in their position and that creates a regulatory moat that no one else can comply with. That's clearly what Armstrong is doing, and he's the largest funder of this. So even engaging in this process, you've lost. If you went into this thinking you're going to be able to cut a good deal with Congress, you've already lost. you didn't even know you were the fool on day one.
Yep. Well, and that let me know if I'm correct on this. We're at such a point of innovation, and it's moving so fast that, you know, people who want to be crooked with social media and with a little bit of a staff, you know, a couple programmers, people who understand social media, know how to work the system, they can create any propaganda spin they want on it, right? And that's exactly what they're doing here, right? It's, you know, they're stacking the deck in their favor, and then they're backing it up. They're filling in behind with all the bots and everything, right? And they're making it look totally legitimate. But there might be absolutely not one human being who understands what they're doing, and they're just getting carte blanche, full runway to do whatever they want with it. Is that?
I'm waiting to find a single person that isn't paid for or a bot to defend this legislation. A single person.
Yeah, so that's kind of their MO, right? We were talking last night on the Technocracy Roundtable, which we're gonna restream actually, but we didn't want to compete with you guys, so. But yeah, so we're gonna restream. Wanted people to watch you. So, but yeah, remember I was talking about how the USDA put in, you know, for the climate smart commodity projects, like it was a huge amount of money, but $41 million went to Farm Journal. I mean, it's that. Well, what other reason could there be other than propaganda? Like, how does that have anything to do with climate smart commodity projects?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's their MO in every arena. That's how they control. Right now, there's also it's in process, but you know that David Ellison took over Paramount. Larry Ellison helped him fund in order to buy out Paramount, and now they're continuing to try and get Warner Brothers so that he can get CNN. It's really about getting CNN. They already have CBS. So I just bring this up because this is a similar thing where they're just trying to control the narrative. How do you control the narrative? You control the narrative through the media. Ellison already has TikTok, so he has that arm of the social media. And of course, you know, as what's his name, Zuckerberg is busy screaming about how, you know, the China bad. Meanwhile, they have this whole feedback loop going where, you know, Meta collects all the data. It helps to build their training models. And Oracle is creating that infrastructure. So, I mean, it's just back and forth, but they use these narratives in order to advance their agendas.
It's very effective. It's an art. We talked about when Craig and I did the episode about this company called Influenceables, which was started by an ex-Trump, part of Trump's campaign team. And they basically run these campaigns where, you know, you pay influencers to post, like to coordinate posts, but without flagging that it's a sponsored post. And so this is, the example was given when, I don't know, RFK was doing something about canceling food stamps for sugary drinks or something like this. I guess the
Snap.
So the Snap thing. Mm-hmm. The soda companies got together and had a whole bunch of influencers at the same time publish a thing saying how ridiculous it was. But you know, I wonder how often that happens. I mean, you look at these accounts like Cat Turd and some of these other things on here. A lot of those tweets are just sponsored tweets that are not labeled as sponsored tweets.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've experienced it, and sometimes it's bots, and sometimes it's real people who are being paid to respond, and you get a variety of these depending on what depending on what entity it is. But when I was in my battle back and forth, at the end of last year, I experienced that, and I know some of them were bots because you would go to and this was on Substack mostly, but you would go to their Substack and they had no history, like not even reads. I mean, there are people who don't post on Substack, but they at least read, right? Because that's what Substack is. It's mostly, I mean, now they have video and they're creating TV. They're branching out, obviously, but primarily it's a place for people to go and read other things. So if you're not a content creator, then you're at least reading something. And all of these would be empty, like had never posted anything before. Okay, I'm like, okay, this has to be a bot, but they came after me and they had lots to say to me. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure that's totally organic. That's just, yeah.
I'm going to dig more into this because again, I'm on a quest to find a single general member of the public that supports this legislation.
Yeah.
And then even the ones that are lobbyists, where they're lobbyists, if you respond to them, I mean, and not, just troll them. If you actually give them a thoughtful response, like they're like, well, here's why this is a good bill. And then you give the counterpoints, you'll never get a response back.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to address what you're talking about, the DeFi, because that's something I've actually been following quite a bit because of, all of my Game B research. And that was a huge buzzword because it's part of their DAO infrastructure, decentralized autonomous organization. And I kept noticing whenever I'd look into it that it's not really decentralized finance, which is what it was supposed to be. They have different requirements for what actually makes a DAO, but oftentimes, what makes DeFi, but oftentimes when they're talking about the DeFi, they mean anything that's on blockchain, which isn't really decentralized because it's transparent. So it's, and then one of the other definitions is that it's smart contracts. And I think that's hugely problematic. I'm not saying that it always has to be, but it can be. And it's very misleading because it means that within that smart contract, like who's setting the code, who's programming it, and is it recursive, and how is it being set to update and to change? And then some of the others are like that it's not decentralized yet, but that eventually it'll be decentralized.
Well, so this is one of the reasons that I like Zano is that you can swap tokens. I can swap a token with you from your wallet to my wallet without a third party, without a smart contract, and it's private. Like this is a kind of, but this is not. A lot of people are not doing this. In fact, almost no one's doing that right now. You're right. A lot of DeFi have been scams, and there is a lot of centralization to it. And there have been smart contracts. And one of the big things that was popular early on was to have an anonymous developer. And then it turns out the anonymous developer wrote the smart contract with a backdoor and got caught. And when they found out the identity of the person, this was somebody that was involved in another one of these things before. So there's a history here.
Yeah. I think it's a buzzword that is very deceptive, and their big buzzword is decentralized, and we know that a lot of these things are being decentralized towards a re-centralized center. I mean, that is Balaji Srinivasan, right in his book, says that. He has a whole section on how it's decentralized towards a re-centralized center. And when you think about what they keep talking about how this is the quote unquote experts who are, the top scientists in the AI industry. But what the terms they keep using are socio-technical, which sounds way more complicated than it is. I did a show on the origins of that going back to Tavistock, but I mean, it's all the social media that we experience day to day. I mean, everybody is very familiar with it, whether they know the term or not. And then cyber physical. And that is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's it's like VR, right? We're in this immersive kind of experience that's interfacing with the cyber world, the VR, virtual reality kind of a world. And then cybernetic organism is what they want to create. But they say that the way that this will be done, and of course it is to create Tesla's 6G world brain. Tesla didn't say 6G. I am inserting that, but he did talk about a wireless world brain. And they say that this will all be done through smart villages. And the smart villages are these DAOs or network states or, the whatever. There's so many different names of them, the freedom cities. And so all of these, so I think they're using these terms, but it's like, I really loved what you did with the definitions that the politicians use, because they have a list of words, but when you look up their glossary, their definition is different intentionally than the words than definitions we know those words to mean.
Absolutely. Well, so again, Balaji's not he's kind of hijacked network states. There are common things going on here, right? There's which is why it's tough, because most of crypto now is either surveillance crypto or stable coins. And now it's tough because I think Balaji is kind of hijacked. But I didn't mention this yesterday. I'm going to be speaking at the Parallel Systems Conference in Portugal in March. So that's going to be really interesting for me, because I don't know any of the people there, but it's going to be a bunch of projects. So I'm going to be I'll learn a lot. I'll have a lot to report back.
I'll be very curious to hear about that. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, whether he's hijacked it from a branding perspective or not, it's still an outgrowth of the seasteading concept. And we know what that's all about. And he says in his book that once the network states are up and running, they can revive the seasteading project. And they're working on that. And that was, Thiel's brainchild. He put, for him, it wasn't that much money. It was like almost $2 million, which I know is a drop in the bucket to him, but it's a sizable amount into this. And it was a total flop. It did not take off. But now they are reviving it. And it's just so they can have their own little billionaires playground where they're not, they're not beholden to any of the nation state laws. But what you're seeing that's very concerning is you're seeing Trump is championing this, but only under his branding. He's calling them freedom cities. So, he's already saying that Praxis, which these tech bros have said is like the model, the ultimate blueprint for a true network state. And Trump is saying that it's going to be a freedom city. So, the fact that he's on board with it, when you when you look at the players who are on board with the Praxis, it is Thiel, Andreessen, it's, all of these tech bros. So,
well, and you saw what they did today. Kushner, did you see him talking about Gaza? They have drawings. This is like way under, it's almost ready to break ground. They're clearing rubble and they're ready to break ground on this thing.
Oh yeah, it's a 20-point plan. I actually, I started to write an article on it several months ago, but I didn't have a chance to finish it. But they have a 20-point plan, and it is literally a blueprint for a beta test for another technocracy. It is a surveillance state infrastructure. That is what that is all about, and so is what's going on in Ukraine. And I don't think you can ignore the fact that Ukraine has been slated to be the central node when they talk about these, whatever you want to call them, C40 cities, smart cities, 15-minute cities, network states, whatever you want to call them. They're all these smart cities, essentially umbrella, freedom city, if you will. But they outline that they're all going to be connected. They're going to be various nodes on a grid. And they keep saying Ukraine is the central node. That is the central hub for all of them. And it is the test bed for this technocracy to be the helm of this AI world society. And they've been very explicit about. They keep saying that, it's been torn down like with the war, and we have to funnel all this money to rebuild it. It sounds a lot like tear it down to build back better.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah. Why Ukraine? Do you know why Ukraine? Do you have any background on why Ukraine would be the central node?
I have some theories. I don't know exactly, except that I know that they already have a lot of, it's always been kind of a, corrupt, like hub for money laundering. It's where a lot of those biolabs were.
Right,
so they
right.
already have like a black market infrastructure there, and they have a lot of control. But beyond that, I don't really know. I know they already have the technocratic infrastructure set up there because of the war, but beyond that, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I didn't know if it had anything to do with the energy, and the contract. It could have something to do with the energy being, right there by Russia, and we know that Europe's wanted access to Russia since World War II, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they went in there trying to get energy, they needed it, and they got smoked. They they didn't have a choice, So,
And also just the geographic location, I think, is a
yeah.
component as well. Yeah, I do think that's valid. I mean, they had that whole proxy war back when it was in 2014, and it was in Ukraine. So yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of components, but I think the energy and the geographical location are definitely factors. But yeah, that's what they're building. So those are the next two. It's going to be Gaza and Ukraine, and I think they really are doing the testing with all of this technology in the war right now. It's both Oracle and Palantir that are running the show, and there, it's not one or the other; it's both of them.
When it kind of fits with the rhetoric, what you're saying, right? If you want Ukraine to be first, then you say we're going to solve this Ukraine-Russia war day one. I come into presidency, but you really don't solve it for a year. But you go into Greenland and you solve that in 2 hours, right? You show up in Davos and boom, by 12:30, post lunch, it's solved, right? It's a little irony to that, right? There's something that doesn't just add up. It's a little disproportionate, I guess, in my mind.
Good relationship with Putin and Zelensky. They love him, but yeah, it's just going to take a few more years to figure it all out.
Yeah.
Did anything happen today? I was writing this thing all day, so I have no idea what happened at Davos today. Was there anything exciting?
What were the big things today? Well, Kaya Kallas, I don't know if you know who she is. She's second in line behind Ursula von der Leyen. She was on today talking about, she's the real warmonger that's driving a lot of this war component. She was on a lot today. She was all over the place. I'm trying to think who else. So obviously Larry Fink was out. Mark Rutte was out talking. Lutnick, he made his rounds again today, and then I think Kushner and Witkoff actually left this morning to go to Russia to try to negotiate this thing. So, that could come out first thing. That could, they could have some quote unquote resolution by Sunday or Monday. How nice and tight, right? I mean, all while this whole thing goes on with the market structure bill, and we're all diverted away from the attention from,
Yes, they're very busy with their board of peace.
Yeah, the board of peace. That's right. And that was big today, right, Courtney? Board of Peace was big today. There were a lot of discussions over that. A lot of faces, a lot of names and faces around the Board of Peace. And yeah, that's getting big quickly.
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
Any thoughts on how that ties in?
The Board of Peace?
Yeah.
I think it's all about building the technocratic blueprint in Gaza. I think that's really largely what that's about. Isn't that Kushner and Tony Blair? And Tony Blair Institute is involved in rebuilding Gaza as well.
Yep. And Ajay Banga of the World Bank, can't forget that he was one of the initial founders, and Marco Rubio. Mm-hmm. And who else was in there? There was 5 initial people: Rubio, Kushner, Witkoff, Ajay Banga, and somebody else was a big name in there too. I can't remember who else it was, but it was 5 of them right out of the gate. But now it's 30. Just grew overnight. It's 30 members now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
$1 billion entry fee, right? Isn't it $1 billion to join the Board of Peace?
Yeah, bargain price. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, all while this is this crypto regulatory infrastructure the ground is being laid for it. I do think the tokenization part is so important for people to wrap their heads around. I was thinking about it today in terms of if you just think about even the word tokenized token, right? Like the etymology of the word, it comes from in ancient Greece, it means to show or to teach. And that has kind of I mean, if you think about it authentically, obviously you would think a true teacher or mentor. But if you think about it in modern times, there is kind of a social engineering kind of component to that, right? To teach, to direct, to show. And then, of course, over time, it has evolved to mean a symbol, right? It's a representative. So just inherent in that definition alone, we already have the hollowing out of any kind of ownership, because it now is a symbol. It represents something, but it is not the thing itself. It's not the tangible thing, like the physical thing. But then also, I think that most people, when they hear token, they think of games, right? Like a video game or like a, an arcade game. You have a token and
it's friendly, right? It has a friendly connotation to it, like it's fun and for good times, fun times, right? It's fun.
But not just fun. I mean, if you think about a game and you think about where they really want to go with tokenization, they keep, and I keep trying to drill this into people, they keep using the term cybernetic organism. What is a cybernetic organism? That is, cybernetics are feedback loops. So, how do you get a feedback loop, a cybernetic feedback loop? You have to data mine from the people, and then you use that data in order to control them, to very personally control them, because you now have targeted information on that person, whether it be the biometric data, biological, the genomic data. When they get that really refined, that's the most kind of permanent, and that I think that's where they get the most control, because it is so permanent. It's your biological data, and it's not just you. That impacts your whole family and your posterity, right? So, but I think when you think about it that way, they're trying to bring people into an ARG. It's like an artificial reality game where people are building the reality together, but it's a game. So you will be incentivized for certain behaviors and de-incentivized for other behaviors. And meanwhile, you own nothing, but if they can pacify you with some soma, maybe you'll be happy.
Yeah. Well, again, we already have representations for things. We already have shares that represent things. We already have centralized databases that serve as references for ownership. So the part about tokenization isn't that it's a digital token that represents something else, because we already have electronic versions that represent the ownership of things. It's the fact that in the way that they're implementing it, it's programmable and controllable centrally. That's actually what makes it worse to me.
It makes it worse.
But there's an aspect of it that's better in the sense that databases are centralized and can be hacked and can be changed. So there are some elements of tokenization that are positive, but like everything else, we got to figure out why all these technologies get hijacked in a very similar way. A lot of them start out with hey, this is going to be something that's going to liberate people and allow people to have more voluntary engagement. And then it gets into the hands of the authoritarians and it turns into this dystopian nightmare. This seems to be a consistent theme, and we haven't figured a way to stop that yet.
It's definitely a consistent theme, but I can't escape the gaming imagery, because I think video games have been such a large component of the intellectual preparation of the battlefield, and they have really they've prepared people and conditioned people for that kind of a immersion in a tokenized, gamified society. And especially as we start to evolve into this next generation of the internet. Right now we're in Web 2. Web 3 will completely change the way that we interact and interface on the internet. And when you start incorporating things like spatial computing and, of course, 6G technology as that comes down the pike, and they're already talking about VR. That was Curtis Yarvin's whole, remember, his humane alternative to genocide is not to liquidate the wars, it's to put them in a virtual reality. That's they've said this. They're pretty explicit about it. He's certainly not the only one. And I don't even think he came up with that idea. I think that's derived from other others that preceded him. He codified it in that sense, with that quote, which was pretty shocking. Just the way he worded it was so dystopian. But I think that's where they're taking us. And they talk about it already. When you listen to these, symposiums on Web3 and in the various fields, take, for instance, like telehealth, they keep saying how it will be an immersive experience. You may not be talking to an actual human doctor, but never mind that. But you'll have you don't have to be there, because you'll feel like you're walking in. They're talking about it in finance. Craig, I don't know how much you've seen of this, but they keep talking about how spatial computing is going to revolutionize finance because humans don't deal with just numbers. We have to be immersed and see it visually and actually feel the experience. And so they're now talking about how we're going to be like inside the graph, you know, with these virtual reality and spatial computing models. So I think things will really change quite a bit. And so the gamified aspect, I think, is very significant.
Well, let me read this. We have the two big, blockchain peer-to-peer prediction markets, Polymarket and Kalshi. And this ties right in with that, right? And I keep saying somehow this is connected because this comes up all the time. And so here's Polymarket. This is the definition of it. It's a blockchain-based peer-to-peer prediction market where users bet cryptocurrency, USDC, on the outcomes of real-world events, from politics and sports to pop culture, using shares that reflect the probability of each outcome. It functions like a crowdsourced forecasting tool, leveraging collective intelligence to generate highly accurate probabilities. So if you think about this from the user perspective, it fits right in with what you're talking about, the gamification of all this, but it also feeds these AI engines because now they have essentially a sentiment reading. They know where everybody's bias is. You know, so when markets reach extremes, this is a market. When markets reach extremes, beware of the crowd sentiment at extremes because they're usually wrong. And that's how they can take everything, right? They can essentially tokenize our everything, right? Our essence. You know, I mean, ultimately, all down to our last little, every thought we potentially have, it all goes into this because that's really what they're monitoring is our thoughts and our behaviors.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's why they, with all of these data mining, and tracking modalities, they're not just tracking what we buy and what we say. The camera is always on. They're watching our facial expression. They're studying, the inflections in our voice and how that changes, and the emotional response. I don't think they'll ever be sentient, contrary to what they'd like us to believe, but they really want to be able to mimic that type of human emotionality. And they're also going to be shifting into meaning kind of interpretation versus just words. And that will play largely into this. But that was actually what I was thinking about, the poly market, which is just betting on futures, right? And so it's not just the betting, but it becomes an artificial reality game. And then they can also steer, right? Because they have all that information. And as you said, it feeds the AI. So they can not only are they collecting all that data, they can also then steer us based on that data.
And they can really tap your emotion. With markets, they can tap your fear and your greed. They can tap your emotion very, very easily. Very easily.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess it all depends on intent. I mean, you could have gamification that isn't bad, but what is their intent?
Well, yeah, but I would say like relegate that to the real video game. That doesn't have to be bad, But when you're starting to have a gamification of the real world, who's controlling that, and why? What is the purpose behind that?
That's the question. That is the question.
Well, while all this stuff's going on this week, Aaron, Hester Pierce, right, the SEC commissioner, was out talking about the New York Stock Exchange readies for 24/7 trading of tokenized stock. Then we get ICE, right, International Continental Exchange. So we have Kelly Loeffler, right? Her husband is the owner of ICE. She's in the small business she's the secretary of small business.
Yep.
And here we have this guy, Michael Blogrund, Intercontinental Exchange Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, says also New York Stock Exchange builds venue for 27 trading of tokenized ETFs. Okay. And then we had who else was out this week? The FTC guy, right? The Federal Trade Commission guy. He's clearing the regulatory framework. I mean, he's like, anything that comes through here, we're going to basically jam it through here. So the FTC is clearing the pathway. I mean, they're clearing the pathway for some big, big things in 2026 and 2027, I think.
So I have to go back to this just because I spent a lot of time on it. And this is where I was originally spending time on tokenization. ICE invested in T0, which was Patrick Byrne's thing. And I've noticed that they made their announcement about their tokenization platform, and it doesn't seem to have anything to do with T0. So I always thought that they bought T0 to shelve it. And I suspect they probably did. Because I'll have to look into how they're implementing their platform. Have you seen any of the details of their trading platform?
I haven't yet. I mean, I probably should. Now that you bring it up, it seems like something I should logically pursue, but I haven't.
Yeah.
Because that was just bizarre. I mean, Patrick Byrne was trying to figure out how to disintermediate the bad guys and disintermediate the New York Stock Exchange, right? And get rid of short selling, and then it ends up getting a strategic investment, and then they don't even end up using it, right? So I've always considered what happened to Overstock to be probably the second biggest rug pull in crypto after Bitcoin. And
don't forget GameStop with the Vlad Penov.
Yeah.
You got to throw that somewhere in the top 5. That's got to be in there somewhere.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah, GameStop.
I mean, how people stay with Robinhood, I don't know. But he's over in Europe going crazy with these betting markets. Like he's been finding every crack and crevice he can integrate himself into in Europe. So I think about this in terms of the US and Europe, and I see what's going on in Europe. And you think back to hard times. You think back to I don't know, the Depression or something, and people turn to alcohol. Right. I mean, that was the Bronfman family, right? And the legal booze running and so forth. And so you wonder now if this gambling isn't going to be some sort of a substitute, as Europe, because Europe is essentially heading into a depression here. I mean, they're very close. I mean, in 2005, the US and Europe were about the same in terms of global consumption. I think they were both sitting around 25%. US is now at 28. Europe's like 17% of global consumption. So they were essentially equal size in 2005, 2010. But Europe has completely fallen apart. And a lot of this is because of the path they've taken with this climate change agenda, right? They've gone windmills, they got rid of the nuclear, they got rid of coal. And now they're hosed. I mean, they're in deep, deep trouble, and they're pushing for this war. I mean, you can see France, they look how quickly they responded when we said we were going to take Greenland. It was almost like immediately they're sending troops there. They're definitely panicked right now. And so anyway, back to Vlad Penov. I think this guy, in GameStop, how anybody stays with Robinhood, the free platform, nothing's free. I mean, it's so costly. Being
you are the product.
yeah, it's free, but they'll take your soul.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe we can use the Technocracy Atlas I want to investigate this XRP. I mean, we talked about Nasara and Jassara, but this XRP thing, I'm looking at it again, and everybody's like the Bank of International Settlements is going to work with XRP, and now somebody's got a Ripple, Visa, PayPal, Swift. These have got to be fake accounts, but at the same time, there are so many. Like this story about XRP, the story was, in 2018 or whatever, it's going to go to $789, which would be greater than the total market capitalization of all of the assets on Earth. And people believed it. So you have a whole bunch of people sitting around, and then all of a sudden on TikTok videos, people are talking about $789, and it's like, I want to know who the marketing team is here. I mean, or who's behind this. Because, by the way, I'm pretty sure Larry Summers was involved at some point. But that's a whole other situation. But this is another one of these stories. People keep on saying that all of the banks are going to settle using Ripple. It's like there's no evidence of this. There hasn't been for 7 years.
So is that a trial run? What's your take on that, Aaron? Is that a trial run? Were they just testing it out? I mean, is that like is there something structural to it? I could never connect the dots with that one.
I was told by somebody that basically what was happening was XRP was paying banks to do a pilot, and then the pilots never went anywhere. So that's which is kind of an unusual way of going about doing a pilot, but again, this has been going on for years. I've seen no evidence of XRP being used because when I was looking at CBDCs, what was being pursued was something called Regulated Liability Network, which was a project. The lead of the platform for that was one of the first 4 Bitcoin developers. And this was to create a framework for central banks to be able to settle with one another, a tokenization platform. But none of it had XRP. And I've looked at all the different CBDC projects going on around the world. XRP is not involved in it. I've not seen. I mean, you can go to the Atlantic Council thing and you can actually dig through and see. They're not there. So I don't know what it is. The hype.
Yeah.
Well, we should look into that. I mean, your gut's probably correct when you say you want to circle back to that XRP. We should check it out and see if we can't figure out more about that one.
Well, no, I mean, this has been going on for years. We're talking about 7-8 years now. They've been saying the same thing and nothing's happened. And it's one of those things like the debt jubilee where people have been saying, oh, Monday they're going to announce. Wednesday, the Bank of International Settlements is going to announce they're using XRP for the settlement. Like, it's very specific, and it's the same outcome, but the date shift. But people buy it. But then now I'm realizing. So I got really kind of demoralized when I did that Nassar Jassar thing, because I was looking at the videos, and they're like a lot of these old people that have been buying into the scam. So people that aren't getting medical treatment because they've been told that med beds are around the corner and that they're going to have all of their debt wiped out. People that stop paying their mortgages because they were told this. And it goes on for years. And so, but then the comments from people, so the same scam artist would come up and put up a new video, and then people would be writing, well, I'm still praying, for this. And it's like, this, and there are all of these comments. I'm like, are those bots? I mean, maybe those are bots, but I mean, it seemed like real people. I mean, there definitely were real people that were filing for bankruptcy and not paying their bills. That there are documented stories of that, but it almost seems like they truly is. The bigger the scam and the longer it goes on, people don't want to admit that they were scammed. So that they'll go in for 10, 15 years on some of this stuff.
Well, I think it's also because there's so many tentacles to the scam, and it's not always. I don't think it always starts off with like, oh, okay, this is a long range vision, but it starts to morph, take on, and they usurp the opportunity. But you see this with a lot of the cute-hearted kind of stuff. There's just so many different arms of it, and they just keep reviving it. I'm seeing this with right now. There's this Promethean action, which is basically an extension of LaRouche. I mean, Lyndon LaRouche passed away, but his wife Helga is still very active. She runs the Schiller Institute, and the Promethean action is just his disciples. But they've taken this really cute-hearted, like, trust the plan. They're very supportive of Trump, but they keep talking about how he's he's fighting globalism. He's going into lion's den, but he's the lion. And I'm like, no, he's part of the plan. He's building the technate. I mean, this is just ludicrous. But the amount of people who have bought this lie, hook, line, and sinker, and they're all just like, yeah, he's playing 10D chess and just sit back and trust the plan. And it's crazy to watch it. It's like, wow, it's literally just an extension of the same Q narrative. It's just morphed a little bit. I'm just bringing this up as like it's another example, but I think that's kind of what happens. You've got, this really big psyop that's this hook gripping lie, but then they sprinkle a little bit of truth in it. This is my ice cream cone analogy. And they sprinkle these truths. And so, they're talking about how the cartels fund the oligarchy. Now, I don't dispute that. I mean, that's kind of historic fact, but that doesn't mean that he's going after the oligarchs. It means he's building the technate. I mean, I don't know how much more evidence we need of that. We wrote a whole book on it, but just in case you need the evidence on that. But I digress.
More people need to read that book, is my opinion. A lot more people need to read that book.
Thank you. I mean, 3.5 hour audio if they can't read it or don't want it.
Exactly. Yes, I highly recommend the book. So without
I picked up 10 and handed a bunch out. I need to pick up another 10 or 20 and hand more of them.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, there are a lot of references. We want to go dig deeper, but I feel like there's no excuse. It's literally that's like a long drive, 3.5 hour audio.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I think hope springs eternal, that's the thing. I mean, I think they feed off of that, and so people who don't have the knowledge, what's the next best thing? Hope, you know what I mean? Hope and prayer. And so it's a filler, right? I mean, if you either can't understand it, or you don't have the time to understand it, or the energy to understand it, you fall back on hope, right? And that's essentially where I think a lot of that stuff with the XRP and like Aaron was saying, with 789, keep hoping.
Or maybe it was 589. I don't remember.
Yeah, whatever.
But
Well, I mean, if you actually look at the psychological definition of hope, hope is about knowing something in your future and knowing that you have control over it. So really what they're selling is hopium. It's complete false.
Right.
These people don't have any control over these narratives that they're buying. They're just like, oh yeah, we'll just sit back, trust the plan. Trump's the savior, or whatever. They're being told that they're buying into, but that's not real hope. I mean, real hope is like, I can see something in the future and I know I have some power over that. I have some agency, and that's what real hope is. So this is I actually think it's a demoralization tactic, because what happens when these people, it's one thing to be like so blinded and you're just blindly worshiping or believing in something. And then what happens when it doesn't come through? You're like completely dejected.
Yeah.
You put all your eggs in that basket, and you just went on blind faith. So I really do think in the end it's actually a demoralization tactic. It's kind of like, I mean, this is a total left turn, but I think it's kind of like what they're doing with Candace Owens. It's like she's so off the rails that the people who are, following her, like, just like blindly following her, are going to be discredited. And I think they'll be so demoralized when it turns out they realize she's like this, paid actor, essentially. And they're going to be, oh, well, we can't trust anybody or anything anymore, because I believed that. And I put all my faith in, she had the answer. I mean, it's just a one-off example. But, I think that's what they do. I think in the end, they're really demoralization tactics.
Yep.
But I want to find out who's behind it. Like how many the people that I see doing the videos that are convincing the other people, do they know that it's a scam, or are they just one more layer in it? Like, who's really pushing it? Because it seems like it's either really sophisticated or really idiotic. I actually am not sure which.
Well, in the case of the Promethean action, I actually think it's really sophisticated, and I think it's very heavily funded. But that some of the others might be purely idiotic. I never underestimate, the potential of that. Yeah.
Well, it seems like throwing one drop of toxicity into a pool of independent journalists and you discredit all of them. You know what I mean? Because here's a black lady. I mean, she's the perfect candidate for this. She's a female, she's black, you really want to get behind that. And then all of a sudden you get let down and you get a rug pull, and it's just a drop of toxicity. And so you discredit all alternative media, right? People just lose hope in the whole, independent media type thing. So it's a perfect play, right? If you really want to be like negative.
Yeah, I know. I'm a little cynical. I apologize. But yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's accurate. It's sadly.
But I feel like being realistic, it's not really so much that I'm cynical. It's like when you're realistic, you can kind of start to see the landscape. Then you know what you're dealing with, and then you can have real hope, because then you can look at the things you do have some possible agency over, and the areas that you can control, and that gives you actual hope. So
because you can navigate, then at least you can navigate it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I hate to do this. I've got a 2.5 hour drive and tonight yet, and I think I want to beat the snowstorm. Or actually, I'm not sure if the snowstorm is.
They keep fluctuating on how much snow we're going to get. But yes, there does seem to be a storm brewing. Now they're saying it's going to be mostly ice, which is probably worse. But yeah.
Oh, I thought at one point I checked in, it was going to be the storm of the century. And then I lost track of what was going on today. But
it's gone up and down. They told us that we were going to get like over 2 feet, which is crazy for here. Wow. Now they're saying maybe 5 inches, but then we're going to get a lot of ice. But ice, like I said, is actually worse. So we went out to the stores earlier this week, and already all the shelves were gone.
Wow. Yeah. I'm looking at this. So anyway, yeah. So we should probably get going before.
Yes. Safe travels.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you guys both for hopping on, and I'll be talking about this a lot. I just see that Cynthia Loomis claims that there's some deal, but she says that all the time. So, I can't believe she gets away with this. By the way, truly, how is? And now there's I don't know.
He is worse than Nancy Pelosi.
She is worse than Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
And how is that not? How is it not called
How is
out?
that possible?
It is possible. It really is possible. I mean, it's not just insider trading. It's we're going to force people to buy this, and then we're going to regulate. It's horrendous. It's truly. I mean, I was talking to somebody today about. Can you imagine that people were demoralized by Nixon's behavior? Can you imagine that? Like that would he'd be winning ethics awards today
For sure.
So
well, I think he does over many today, actually. That's a tragic commentary on our times, but yeah.
It truly is.
It was very mild in comparison.
Yeah. Well, thank you both, and I'll be back next Thursday. So we're only doing this now one time a week. So next Thursday at 6 p.m. And the article I don't know when the article is going to be out. I probably have another day of editing, and then I have to send it to Brownstone, and I don't know how it's going to take them. It's long, so I need to cut some of it.
Oh, good luck. I look forward to reading it, but the cutting part is usually harder for me than the writing. So. Oh
yeah, editing takes me 5 times as long, at least. Oh. It's just it's tragic.
The article I wrote for the New American, it was like, writing it was no problem. Editing took forever, and they're so strict about how many words you can have. Yep. And so it was like I just kept cutting and cutting. I think I ended up being like 60 words over, and I was like, you can take them out. I can't even see it anymore. Yeah. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, guys. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this, Aaron. Important stuff. Great work.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Good night, Courtney.
Good night.
Started with one photo, one connection, one name. Ran it through Google Images, reverse search and no shame. Found 3 more photos, found a flight log, found a date. Cross-reference with public records, now I'm up to 8. Tagged it in the Discord, someone found the company, someone else found the offshore account in Belize, someone else found the board members, the donations, the chain. Now we got 47 people mapping the campaign. 1 becomes 2 becomes 10 becomes more. Truth has a network effect we can't ignore. Every connection reveals 10 more doors. This is the cascade, this is the score. Truth cascade, watch it domino. One investigation leads to another, watch it go. Truth cascade, we can't stop the flow. Every cover up connected, now the whole world knows. Cascade, cascade, truth cascade, cascade can't be delayed. Can't be delayed. Metadata embedded in the image. We extracted the GPS from the location, found the property records, found the LLC, found the shell company, found the parent corp, found the CEO. Cross-reference biblical donations, now we got the quid pro quo. Someone made a spreadsheet, someone made a map, someone made a timeline, someone made a slab, someone made a TikTok thread, 2 million views in a day. Someone made a GitHub repo, organized the array. 1 becomes 5 becomes 50 becomes spread. Truth is exponential once it leaves your head. Every whistleblower empowers 10 more instead. This is the cascade, this is the thread. Truth cascade, watch it domino. 1 investigation leads to another, watch it go. Truth cascade, we can't stop the flow. Every cover up connected, now the whole world knows. Cascade, cascade, truth cascade, cascade can't be delayed. They try to compartmentalize, separate the scam handles. Keep the connections hidden, but we're digital vandals. Taking down the walls between the separate lives. Watching the cascade reveal the enterprise. One truth leads to another. One name leads to another. One dot leads to another. One thread starts the cascade. Truth cascade. Watch it down, me no one. Investigation leads to another. Watch it go. Truth cascade. We can stop the flow. Every cover up connected. Now the whole world knows cascade. Truth cascade. It's exponential. One person finds a thread, becomes existential. Truth cascade. It's consequential. Every secret that they bury now is preferential. Cascade. Cascade. Truth cascade. 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 Can't be delayed. Can't be delayed. Cascade. Cascade. True cascade. Started with one photo. Ended with 500 connections. That's the cascade. That's the power.